recording. Tammy will be joining us remotely shortly, but we're not going to wait to begin. So as soon as I see that YouTube has let us in the door. Okay, so I will call to order this regular monthly meeting of the Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees for the month of December, last scheduled meeting of 2021, if you can believe that. Are there any changes, additions, or deletions to the agenda?
No.
Okay. Item number 3 on our agenda is our first public comment period, privilege of the floor number 1. We don't have anyone from the public in attendance in person. We have 2 folks online, but they're both representatives of other boards. So we'll move right along to them. Item number 4 is reports from representatives. So if Ann or Mary would like to take it away, please do.
I can go first. Let's see, the biggest thing that we're dealing with right now at the county, of course, is COVID. As people have probably been seeing some of the news, we're up to the highest ever. We broke a record, which is not a good record you want to break, but 748 active cases. And approximately 300 are from Cornell. And so that leaves about 400 and something in the community where what we believe at Cornell happened is students went home for Thanksgiving and then came back and had gatherings. As far as the county goes, we're having a lot of what they call community spread, which means people aren't able to trace back where they're getting COVID from. So that means it's pretty widespread. We've had at least 2 confirmed cases of the Omicron, if I'm pronouncing that correctly. And we've had in the last week and a half, 2 more people pass away from COVID. As far as the booster shots, we had 1 clinic Saturday at the mall. I can't remember if it was 1,000 or 1,200 people that we were able to get their booster shots. So what we're hearing is that the Omicron variant is you're not as protected with just the first 2 doses. With the 3rd dose is really what you need to be protected more from the Omicron. So we're encouraging people to get the booster shot, and for that to be like a complete vaccination. I know people were saying, oh, when you got the second shot, you're completely vaccinated. Now, really, it's the 3rd, either the 3rd or the booster shot is really what's giving you pretty good protection. And so it's what we're hearing is no different than when you've been hearing on the news. It's more highly transmissible than the Delta variant, but it doesn't seem to be quite as physically devastating to people. So that's good. But the proof will be in the pudding, unfortunately, with this many people infected right now. We'll see what happens. And so you know that the New York State, the governor instituted a mask or vaccination mandate for every organization and business starting today. The health department, and she's having the health departments at the counties be in charge of enforcement. So what we're doing is we're trying to do an educational component first, and then we're also going to have a complaint system set up. So similar to how it was early on when there was the state enforced mandate for masking. So there'll be a place on the website for the county where you can go and make a complaint for a particular organization or business. We're not going to go around and, we're not planning to go around and go check on places. With that being said, the county health department is, I don't want to say overwhelmed, but actually I do. And so they are overwhelmed. They're having a hard time keeping up with contact tracing, as you can imagine, and with people in quarantine and isolation. There's just so many people to keep track of. So we are behind. We're trying to catch up, but it's really hard. So we're just, I know a lot of people too are doing the home tests, which we want you to, if you get a positive home test, to please go get tested as a backup, because the health department tests are more accurate. And then also you get into the system where we can help keep track of you, keep track of your, and reach out to your contacts. We don't know if we're going to have any more booster clinics right now, because we just don't have the staffing to do that, because we're dealing with all the other things right now. So just a reminder, you can go to drugstores, doctor's offices. A lot of doctor's offices are vaccinating people. They're having clinics, and you don't have to be a patient to go to most of the doctor's offices. You just need to give them a call, ask them when they're doing a clinic, or ask for an appointment to go in. And wherever you go for the vaccination, the booster, it's free. It's still free. And testing is still free in the county too. So we're encouraging people, especially with the holidays coming up, you want to get, if you're going somewhere, you're having people come, you can go get tested, and within 24 to 48 hours, you'll get the results. And that, again, is completely free. So please go get tested. Let's see what else here we have. This is our last month for many legislators. This is the end of our 4-year term. All county legislators were up for re-election this year. And so you're stuck with me for another 4 years, but we have 5 legislators who are retiring. Our county attorney happens to also be retiring, Jonathan Wood, by the end of the year. And Bill Troy is, who was appointed. He was the second in line. So he's going to be our county attorney. Let's see, we voted for part of our Tioga Street property. We have a vacant property down on Tioga Street near Sears Street in Ithaca. And we voted to sell a portion of that on the part on Sears Street to be affordable housings, for sale, affordable housing in INHS. We're selling it to INHS for them to build 4 affordable for sale housing units. We hired somebody to be the project director for our community justice center. And that's, and I'm not sure I'm going to pronounce her name correctly. Manalia, Monalia. I haven't met her yet. Manalia Smiley. And so she's going to be the lead on the implementation of the reimagining public safety plans. And I do keep bringing up about coordinating with municipalities. And so last time I asked that last week, they said now with this new person on, there should be some bandwidth to be able to do that more. So I'm hoping when this person comes on, I can hook her up with Rorden and the chief, and hopefully some like I said, more coordination. Do you want the sales tax numbers for October?
Please.
Was up, sales tax was up in October, 17.8%. And I don't have the exact numbers here, but it was something like 5% up even from 2019 before the pandemic. So that's a good sign that we're rebounding in that. And the municipalities were up 18.15% from the same time last year. And as far as the county, with our budget projections, we've already reached 96% of what we budgeted as expected income from sales tax. So we're going to be doing good in that. we increased the annual solid waste fee again, $5. So that's going to be up to $75 for each single family dwelling. And I explained this last year. I'm pretty sure that we've just, our costs are going up, unfortunately. And we're hoping the reimbursement for the items that people are recycling, we're hoping we've reached an end to the prices going down for our reimbursement. We're hoping that our reimbursement will go up from now on. So we're hoping we don't have to raise that again. Let's see, and I think I said before, but we did have our final vote on the budget since I saw you last. So we did institute a 0% tax increase for the county. And with the budget, there was and I'm not sure if yeah, okay, I already have down that I mentioned these things. So I think that's about it.
Okay, any questions or comments for Ann?
Oh, that's great. Thanks, Ann.
Thank you. I do have to run to another meeting I popped out of, so I'll be seeing you guys, and let me know. You can text me if you have any questions about anything then. Thank you.
Great, thanks, Ann. Mary.
Yeah.
Please.
A few things to report. The Cemetery Road Bridge is open, finally. It was finished like about a week or two ago, and there's just a little bit of landscaping that needs to be done, and that'll be done in the spring. The town is very close to finishing up the noise ordinance. And I actually wanted to take time to see if there might be a chance that we could make the town noise ordinance town-wide rather than have it apply to town outside the village. Simply because, if you have one set of standards in the village and one set of standards for the town outside the village, the borders are pretty permeable, and it might make more sense to have one ordinance for the whole town. So I was going to suggest that once there's just one little issue that we need to kind of iron out with the ordinance as it is right now. And I was wondering if I could forward it on to you, Rorden, and you could take a look at it maybe and see if that might be something you'd want to consider.
Sure, yeah, send it along and I'll take a look. And then, as you know, logistically, it would be easy to make that happen. We would just have to repeal ours if we wanted to then let the town's noise ordinance supersede.
Right.
But yeah, we can, if you forward it along, we can take a look at it, see if there's anything that stands out as problematic, and then run it by council and see what he thinks. Be happy to do that.
Okay. Yeah, I mean, there'll be stuff in it that doesn't really apply to the village because, like ag districts would have a different noise level. But I think that it might be a good idea to have something that applies to town and village. Let's see. Now we're going to have a town board vacancy in January. Because Caitlin Olson, who is currently on the town board, was elected supervisor, and she will start in January. So I'm just putting it out there that if you know anybody in the town who just needs to be a town resident, 18 years old, who would like to apply. They should contact the town clerk. I don't think we have an application yet, but hopefully we'll have one before the end of the year. And along with that, I'll just mention that Roxanne Marino has expressed interest in that town board position. And, she has a lot of experience with the town. As you probably know, she was the supervisor, and she also served on the town board and served on several different committees. We hired a new planner. She has not started yet. Her name is Charvi Gupta. She needed to give a notice where she's working now. And we have to iron out some visa issues, but we're looking forward to having her come on and to start working on our revision of the comprehensive plan next year. Let's see. The last thing that I was going to mention is that, we did get a $5,000 Clean Energy Communities grant. And this was for clean heating and cooling. And we found out that we don't have to spend the money right away. We have a couple of years to designate those funds for some sort of energy efficient improvement in the town. So we plan to use that, apply that money towards the purchase of an electric vehicle for the code enforcement in 2023. So you might want to keep that in mind with your own grants that you might realize from this Clean Energy Communities program, that you don't have to spend it like right away. And that's about it.
Any questions for Mary? Any more conversation, Mary, on the townwide water study, which as I understand, is hopefully going to include stormwater as well?
I believe so. I'm not sure. Hold on a second. Let me. I know that we put money into the budget for next year for water studies. Okay. Who's going to do them, and what form they're going to take. I don't really know right now, but I can find that out for you.
Yeah, and it's not. I was about to say it's not urgent, but actually, I'm just curious what the urgency level and timeline you might have in mind for that, because I think the next step in the village's stormwater efforts has to be coordination with the town, because some of the sensitive areas that seem to have the worst of it are at the town lines, either the Ulysses town line on one side or the other, or worse yet on the Seneca County line side, which will be interesting to try to coordinate. But in any event, on the Ulysses part of things, I'll be curious to know.
Yeah, I will. I'll check into that and I'll get back to you on that.
Okay, great. Any other questions for Mary? All right, well, thank you, Mary.
Thank you.
Item number 5 on the agenda, I'm going to hand off to Trustee Darfler here in a moment. Is our consideration of the secret determination related to the draft comprehensive plan and the consideration of the draft plan itself. I do just want to say that this is the culmination of 3.5 years of effort on the part of the Comprehensive Plan and Zoning Revision Committee. I do want to thank, well, Trustee Giles for kicking it off, and then Trustee Darfler for picking up the ball and running with it at a good pace, even in spite of everything that 2020 threw at us. I want to thank the committee and the committee members. I think it has to tally into the thousands of hours of effort on the part of everyone involved. I'm happy with the way that the plan unfolded. Thank you as well to EDR, the consulting group that helped kind of shepherd the process along. And regardless of what our discussions lead to tonight, I think it's a strong effort, a good document, well produced. And so thank you, Ben, for all of the efforts. Thank you to all the committee members. And hopefully it's something that this board will take up for consideration. But I'll hand it off to you now to review the secret determination draft resolution and the plan itself.
Boy. All right. So in the Dropbox, there is a comp plan 2021 folder that has all of the necessary documents in it. I think the first place to start is to look at, we looked at part 3 last time around, last month. I think we were all pretty clear on it. It's not much once we've kind of gone through all the previous pieces, but just to say that this project will result in no significant adverse impacts on the environment, and therefore an environmental impact statement need not be prepared. Accordingly, this negative declaration is issued. The thing that we add tonight is a larger reasons in support of the termination. So there's a draft document in that folder under the secrecy part of it that kind of goes at great length around talking about the impact on various aspects, the different top level titles as you walk through the seeker. And this has been prepared in conjunction with EDR, just talking through all the different parts. But essentially, as we've kind of discussed here in previous months, gets to the point that the comp plan itself is not actually requiring any specific action be taken, but is merely outlining a path forward along which we may make actions, and those actions would themselves be reviewed through a seeker process should they require that. So there's a lot of extra information in here, but at the end of the day, it kind of goes to the negative declaration as we've discussed in the previous month. So I'll maybe stop there and see if there's any concerns before we formally look to accept a negative declaration. I should say, to take a step back, actually, that on advice of counsel, the resolution that we have before us, which is also in that folder and is also quite long, is a joint combined resolution. So the intent is to both, should we adopt that resolution, would both adopt the comprehensive plan as written, as well as find a negative declaration. So it's kind of a 2-for-1, but bringing them together helps it kind of tie the two pieces together more cleanly. So yeah, with that in mind, I'd be interested if there's any discussion or conversation around the negative declaration area first.
Any comments or questions from board members with respect to the seeker portion?
Not really have any comment other than what's in the resolution. I think it's fairly clearly.
Jessica?
Nope, good, yeah, second that. When you say trustee Carter.
All right. So then with that, the other section of this resolution here is around just the adoption of the actual comprehensive plan. I think we've gone through it at quite length at this point. There haven't been any substantive changes to it since I think we've looked at it last. The only real changes at this point have been continued additions to the appendix for community input for emails and comments that we've had one way or another. So that's continued to get expanded, but otherwise we've heard all of that information, all those comments, and feel at this point that the comprehensive plan addresses all the comments that we've heard. So there's not much else unless someone else wants to bring something up now to talk about, but that would be the other thing to talk about here.
I'm satisfied with the comprehensive reality of the comprehensive plan.
It lives up to its name.
Yes,
Any other board comment on the comprehensive plan piece?
I think just to reiterate again, something that I think has been said is that the objective of a document like this is that it continues to be a living document. So I hope people who are sort of trying to get comments in at the 11th hour, I hope we don't stop just because of any action we take today. I do hope it continues. That's very much our intent. I know we've all sort of expressed that at varying points, but I just want to reiterate it now. I think it's important. So if you are listening, please don't stop engaging. Hopefully someone's listening later, I guess, but I think that is important to reiterate, but that's really all I have to say.
I think it's also worth pointing out that many of the comments we've received really are about zoning and the implementation details, and that is absolutely the next thing we'll get into, and will be only the start of that process. And we'll again welcome those comments when we get to the point where it makes the most sense to listen to them and really fold them into the working that we're doing.
My only comment would be that to kind of echo what others have said, we appreciate and carefully consider all of the comments that have been submitted to date, and we would certainly encourage village residents to continue to submit comments on the comp plan now and going forward. It is a document that in theory is supposed to be reviewed every 5 years, and as we see, it takes several years to do the review. So if we think of it as an ongoing constant review of what the community's desires are, then comments are welcome at any time. Those pieces that are zoning specific are yet to be addressed, as Ben mentioned, but they certainly will be taken into consideration when we get to that part. The concept of any type of comprehensive planning document is that it is not law, but it is meant to guide future law. And so I think that this effort shows how much work has gone into creating something that will be a good guiding document for future zoning. So please continue on the part of the community, please continue to offer feedback now and in the future on how the comprehensive plan can be made better if need be, or simply altered for changing dynamics over time.
So then with that all said, I'm hesitant to read aloud the full resolution, though I'm open to doing that should we want to. We could also review just the resolves or take a moment ourselves to kind of review this and vote. I'm sure if you had any ideas on how you wanted to work through that.
I actually think given the nature of the comp plan, as much fun as it is to read several thousand words, I think given the nature of the comp plan that we should read it into the record. And we can take turns if either one of us needs a drink.
I spent my
Water
undergrad practicing reading very quickly. If you'd like me to just speed read like in the insurance advertising.
That would be, if we have someone capable, that would be.
It's certainly been,
It's a set of mine.
it's not that many pages, boys, we can do it.
it's certainly been available online, but I do think that comprehensive plans, I mean, this will be, if we adopt it tonight, will be 13 years since the last one was adopted, so I think we should dignify it with a reading. You can start that. Everyone take a page.
Yeah, I'm kind of thinking everyone takes a page. I'm happy to, I'll start and we can just go around the room.
All right,
All right, resolutions of Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees making negative declaration of environmental impacts, approving recommendations of and referrals from Comprehensive Plan Committee, and formally adopting 2021 Village of Trumansburg Comprehensive Plan. Whereas the Trumansburg Village Board of Trustees, I probably shouldn't say that, proposes to adopt amendments. I'm gonna take out that first word, village, whereas second village, whereas the Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees. Already we're finding things. Good thing we're reading it out. The Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees proposes to adopt amendments and updates the Village of Trumansburg Comprehensive Plan to reflect conditions that have changed since 2008, and the entirety of the comprehensive plan has thus been restated into one and the same integrated whole document entitled Trumansburg Comprehensive Plan 2021, hereafter the Comp Plan. And whereas under the supervision of the mayor, the Board of Trustees appointed a comprehensive plan and zoning revision committee, the CPZR committee, to guide the process, and with the assistance of planning consultant EDR, the CPZR developed the Village of Trumansburg 2021 comprehensive plan, its amendments and updates, and the environmental documentation underlying the comp plan and the environmental review thereof. And whereas the comp plan includes an updated 20-year vision statement, goals, strategies, prioritized actions, resource maps, community survey results, updated demographic information, and recommendations for improved zoning and other land use regulations considering climate change, future growth and development. And these updates are needed to provide residents and local decision makers with the data and guidance they need to make informed decisions about the village's future. And whereas CPZR provided a copy of the draft comp plan to the Village Board of Trustees in January 2021. The draft comp plan was posted on the village's website in January 2021 to provide continuous access to the draft comp plan for public review and comment. And the Board of Trustees carefully reviewed the January draft comp plan over several months, which resulted in revisions to the draft comp plan. And whereas the CPZR properly noticed and held a public hearing at the farmers market on September 20th, 2021 to hear public comments on the draft comp plan, and by resolution dated September 20th, 2021, the CPZR submitted their approved draft comp plan to the Village Board of Trustees for review and consideration for adoption. And whereas the Village Board of Trustees held a virtual public information meeting to review the draft comp plan and the comprehensive plan adoption process on July 26, 2021 from 7 to 9 p.m. And the Village Board of Trustees further held an in-person public meeting for the public to review the draft comp plan at the farmers market on August 17, 2021. And whereas the proposed action under seeker is administrative in nature, involving the adoption of the comprehensive plan by the Board of Trustees, and the proposed action does not include the adoption of any local laws, zoning modifications, or amendments of other land use regulations. And the village reviewed part one of the full EAF and one deemed it complete and adequate on July 12, 2021. 2, undertook to commence becoming the lead agency for environmental review, and 3, classified the action as a type 1 action for section of 6 NYCRR section 617.4. And whereas in accordance with the provisions of 6 NYCRR part 617, the Board of Trustees of the Village of Trumansburg gave notice that it intends to serve as lead agency for the seeker review of the action, and served a copy of part 1 of the full EAF to the involved interested agencies, along with a notice of intent and request for comments relative to the project. And no other agency has objected to the Village Board of Trustees being seeker lead agency, and more than 30 days has passed since such notice and information was provided, such that the village confirms and redeclares itself as lead agency for environmental review of this action. And
Oh, I can take over, but also 30 days has passed.
Thank you.
And whereas the village board, having commenced a coordinated seeker review and having updated FEAF Part 1 and reviewed FEAF Parts 2 and 3, and having further scheduled a final public hearing to consider adoption of the comp plan and to obtain further public comment and evidence upon the environmental review thereof, and whereas pursuant to the general municipal law, section 239-1, SEC, never said that out loud, don't even know what that means. The FEAF Part 1 and draft updated comp plan were referred to the Tompkins County Department of Planning and Sustainability, and by response dated September 21st, 2021, the county determined and recommended as follows. Natural resources and environmentally sensitive areas. We recommend expanding the strategy on page 62 to read, update or establish regulations to improve natural resource protection, including surface waters, woodland, wetlands, and floodplains, unique natural areas, and stream buffers. This modification is recommended to help preserve and protect the distinct properties of the Frontenac Creek Glen UNA, located in the village of Trumansburg, and to help preserve and protect water quality. Climate change. We recommend broadening the strategy on page 76 to read, encourage and incentivize energy conservation, the use of heat pumps for heating and cooling, and the use of alternative energy sources for homeowners, rental property owners, and businesses. We further recommend adding an action, like the earlier action for village buildings, to require new buildings and encourage existing building owners to consider the use of alternative energy sources, such as solar and wind energy generation systems. And whereas the village has incorporated all of the official recommendations of the county into this resolution shall constitute the reply of the village to county recommendations under the planning referral requirements of the GML section 239-M6 and village law section 7-722 5B, and the village specifically explains and replies to the county as follows. Mr. Mayor.
Natural resources in environmentally sensitive areas. We have expanded the strategy on page 62 to read update or establish regulations to improve natural resource protection, including surface waters, woodland, wetlands, and floodplains, unique natural areas, and stream buffers. Climate change. We have broadened the strategy on page 76 to read encourage and incentivize energy conservation, the use of heat pumps for heating and cooling, and the use of alternative energy sources for homeowners, rental property owners, and businesses. We have added an action to require new buildings and encourage existing building owners to consider the use of alternative energy sources, such as solar and wind energy generation systems. And whereas the Village Board of Trustees held a public hearing on November 8th, 2021 to hear comments from the public on the comp plan, as well as its potential environmental impacts, and all members of the public wishing to speak and be heard or wishing to submit documents and evidence were allowed to so proceed. And the matters so presented or submitted have been or were duly considered. And the Village Board has now determined that it, 1, has complied with Article 7 of village law respecting all procedures. 2, has or now will attend to all requirements of seeker. And 3, has sufficient information to make the determinations of significance under seeker and make a final decision respecting the comp plan and its adoption. Last seeker is the Q in our foot.
It says SERQA instead of
Thank you.
And whereas as lead agency, the Village Board of Trustees considered and analyzed each of the potential identified impacts in relation to the question of whether such impacts were so probable of occurring or so significant as to require a positive declaration of environmental impact or impacts. And after weighing the actual and potential impacts arising from or in connection with this updated comp plan, and after duly noting that the goals and priorities of the existing comprehensive plan were not changed in a wholesale manner, but updated to 2021, and no new or substantial reordering of resource priorities has here occurred, as also confirmed by the CPCR, such that after also considering and weighing, 1, the probability of each potential impact occurring, including weighing the speculative nature of some potential future contingencies and the potential non-speculative nature of others. 2, the duration of each potential impact. 3, the irreversibility of each potential impact, including a consideration of permanently lost resources of value. 4, whether each potential impact can or will be controlled or mitigated by permitting, reviews, or other regulatory processes. 5, the regional consequence of the potential impacts. 6, the potential for each impact to be or become inconsistent with a village's master or comprehensive plans, both existing and as amended, as well as local needs and goals. And 7, whether any known objections to the plan relate to any of the identified potential environmental impacts. The Village Board found that these factors did not cause any potential negative environmental or related social or resource impact to be or be likely to become a moderate or significant negative environmental impact. And upon a review and discussion of Part 2 of the FEAF on the record, and the consideration of the impacts relating to all areas of potential environmental concern, the Village Board has directed the confirmation and completion of FEAF Part 3 and the issuance of a negative declaration respecting this action. So now therefore be it resolved by members of the Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees as follows. 1, the Village Board of Trustees for the Village of Trumansburg be and hereby is again declared to be lead agency. Based upon a thorough examination and analysis of the FEAF and review of the seeker regulations at 6 NYCRR 617.7, and based upon input from other involved and interested agencies, members of the public and the Village Board's knowledge of the area surrounding the project, the Village Board has considered reasonably related long-term, short-term, direct, indirect, and cumulative impacts And while the village recognizes that over time, the implementation of recommended actions contained within the comp plan are intended to create opportunities for housing, business, and protection of the environment, and the protection and development of community character, the overall extent of future or potential impacts is uncertain until such time that specific actions are identified. Moreover, the comp plan itself mitigates the likelihood of future moderate or large impacts by providing this guidance respecting development and future rules and codes, and by promoting full administrative and environmental reviews respecting approvals in the built environment. Thus, to illustrate and further document this analysis, the village board makes additional specific findings with respect to seeker, supporting these mitigating and future mitigative conclusions.
Impact on land. The updated comprehensive plan establishes goals for future land use and business development that respects the quality of life in Trumansburg. These goals can be achieved through review and updating local land use regulations, including the village zoning ordinance. As a relatively built-out community, future development will occur as infill development on vacant and underutilized properties in already developed neighborhoods, as well as new development on undeveloped buildable parcels. When specific actions or site-specific projects are proposed by either public or private sector sponsors, review and compliance with state and village environmental quality review processes will be required. B, impact on geological features. The proposed action is not anticipated to result in the modification or destruction of or inhibit access to any unique or unusual geology and landforms. C, impacts on surface water. The updated comprehensive plan establishes goals and strategies that discourage future development from encroaching upon surface water or otherwise adversely affecting wetlands or other surface water bodies. The updated comprehensive plan establishes strategies and actions to improve stormwater management, drainage, and erosion and sediment control. D, impact on groundwater. The proposed action is not anticipated to result in significant new or additional use of groundwater or have the potential to introduce contaminants to groundwater resources or an aquifer. Surficial aquifers exist to the west-southwest of the village in Ulysses. E, impact on flooding. The proposed action is not anticipated to result in development on land subject to flooding. F, impact on air. The adoption of the updated comprehensive plan will not adversely affect air quality or include state-regulated air emission sources. G, impact on plants and animals. The adoption of the updated comprehensive plan will not adversely affect natural resources, including plants and animals.
H, impact on agricultural resources. The updated comprehensive plan does not recommend or create conditions that might adversely affect agriculture or otherwise encourage the development of agricultural properties. I, impact on aesthetic resources. Adoption of the updated comprehensive plan is not anticipated to adversely affect aesthetic resources. J, impact on historic and archaeological resources. The proposed action is not anticipated to adversely affect historic and archaeological resources. K, impact on open space and recreation. The proposed action is not anticipated to result in a loss of recreational opportunities or a reduction of open space resources. L, impact on critical environmental areas. The proposed action will not adversely affect established critical environmental areas. M, impact on transportation. Adoption of the updated comprehensive plan will not result in adverse impacts on transportation. N, impact on energy. The proposed action is not anticipated to cause an increase in the use of any form of energy. O, impact on noise, odor, and light. The proposed action is not anticipated to result in noise, odor, or outdoor lighting. P, impact on human health. The updated comprehensive plan is not anticipated to have an adverse impact on human health, for example, from exposure to new or existing sources of contaminants. Q, consistency with community plans. The proposed action is consistent with the recommendations of the village's 2008 comprehensive plan that recommends periodic review and updating of the plan. R, consistency with community character. The updated comprehensive plan is consistent with existing community character and intended to maintain and enhance community character and aesthetics with, for example, recommendations to establish up-to-date commercial design and development guidelines and standards. Am I still on my same page, or you want to
I
take it
can take
home?
it over.
Take us home.
Take it
Take us
home.
Therefore, the village board, in accordance with Article 8 of the New York State Environmental Conservation Law and seeker regulations promulgated hereunder, and based upon one, its thorough review of the full EAF and any and all other documents prepared and submitted with respect to this proposed action and its environmental review and the comments, findings, and analysis herein and based thereupon. Two is its thorough review of the potential relevant areas of environmental concern to determine if the proposed action may have any moderate or significant adverse impacts on the environment, including but not limited to the criteria identified in 6 NYCRR section 617.7C, and 3, its completion of the full EAF, including the findings noted therein, which findings are incorporated herein as if set forth at length, finds the proposed action of approving the 2021 updated Village of Trumansburg Comprehensive Plan will not individually or cumulatively have any moderate or significant negative environmental consequences or impacts. And the village board therefore hereby makes and declares a negative determination of environmental significance, a quote negative declaration, in accordance with seeker for the above referenced proposed action, and determines that an environmental impact statement is therefore not required. 4, a responsible officer of the village board be and is hereby authorized and directed to complete and sign the determination of significance confirming the foregoing negative declaration, which fully completed and signed full EAF finding statement and determination of the significance shall be incorporated by reference herein, and the village clerk is directed to file copies hereof in the official records of the village, and to deliver or file a copy of this resolution and negative declaration with 1, all involved and interested agencies, and that should be 2. And 2, any persons requesting a copy, and 3, county planning per village law section 7-72212, and the village clerk be further directed to 4, complete and file a summary and notice hereof with New York State DEC for publication in the Environmental Notice Bulletin, ENB, by sending such notice and forms required to the DEC to the ENB at their address or via electronic delivery. Based upon a thorough examination and review of the draft comprehensive plan by the CPZR, the Village Board of Trustees, the Village Planning Board, and the Tompkins County Planning Department, as well as the feedback and input of village residents, the Village Board of Trustees for the Village of Trumansburg hereby approves and adopts the Village of Trumansburg Comprehensive Plan dated November 8th, 2021. This resolution shall take effect immediately.
Now, I would entertain a motion. I would entertain a motion to accept and adopt the resolution as read.
So moved.
Second.
A motion and a second. Any discussion from the part of the board?
Let's read it again.
Love it. Good time.
I would just remove the word comprehensive in this number 5.
Oh, yeah. It's a compliment. That's true.
It is a comprehensive comment.
Indeed it is. I'm also removing the Village Board of Trustees for the Village of Trumansburg to just say the Board of Trustees for the Village of Trumansburg.
I would just offer my thanks and congratulations again. It's hard to believe, I think, when I took my first seat on this board, that was like the birth of the CPZR. That seems like a really long time ago, so it just goes to show how much work has been done, and like Rory said, especially during a difficult couple of years, to bring it home during everything else that we've gone through is very impressive, and thanks to everybody. It's great.
Any other comments or discussion? Hearing none, then I would ask the clerk to call for a roll call vote on the
Or
adoption
there, you
of
still end
the
up right around 40 on the dot. Bingham says, at least the
2021
wind will be
draft
less of a factor for tomorrow as well.
Trustee Darfler,
Aye.
Trustee Giles,
Aye.
Trustee Hannan,
Aye.
Trustee Carver,
Aye.
Mayor Hart,
Aye.
unanimously passes. Congratulations.
Congratulations. Thank you, Ben. Please pass along again. Thanks to all of the members of the CPZR. I'd say have time to rest on laurels. We know how that works. But thank you. This is
It's great.
as significant undertaking, significant achievement. So,
Thank you. And I wanted to just take a moment to thank, the committee as well, the village staff that had input, all the boards that had input, all the residents who took time to review this and give input. And I see a couple of the members of the CPZ are on tonight, so specific thanks I felt was needed for the three members that have been on the committee from the start all the way through. So that's David Breeden, who's on the call, Steph Bailey, and Kathy Kumper, who really have done an enormous amount of work and given quite generously of their time and efforts in this effort. So it's been quite a push, and I'm glad that you're here today.
Huzzah!
excellent work, and thank you. Which brings us to item number 6 on the agenda, which is our consent agenda. We have meeting minutes from November 8th, our November 8th meeting, as well as our abstract of claims, bills we have to pay, which I'll read through here. We have a general fund abstract totaling $357,245.44. We have a EMS billing abstract totaling $19,406.95. A water fund abstract totaling $42,770.45. A sewer fund abstract totaling $24,979.65. And a trust and agency abstract totaling $29,490.65. And so I would entertain a motion to adopt the consent agenda as presented.
So moved.
The motion, do we have a second? Any comments or questions?
So the willow tree, $500.
I'm sorry, I didn't hear the second word and I apologize.
It was me, Keith.
That was 950.
Thank you, Keith.
Are there 2 in there?
There's one in there for 950.
Okay, that's what it was. I was thinking that was low.
Do you see it?
No.
The very first entry on the agenda.
Ah, okay, I see. So the 500 was just cleanup. Well, that went from very, very inexpensive to very, very expensive very quickly. And then for the minutes are confusing. There's a lot of highlighting and a lot of blank spaces, and I stopped voting even after I started introducing things. I think there's a fair amount of editing to be done on those.
May need to refresh. I believe the highlights have been removed.
Yes, but I am looking at the packet, so maybe is there a newer version?
Oh, so yeah, it doesn't have the move in second.
Yes, 6.a in the Dropbox.
Oh, okay, yeah, I was looking at the packet.
Me too.
The packet was released before the initial
Okay.
finalized.
I see.
Thank you.
Well, that just looks much better.
Any other comments or questions? None, and all in favor, please say aye.
I
Any opposed? Okay. Item number 7 on the agenda is our board member reports. Handful of items in the Dropbox. Item 7.a.1 is our agreement to continue engagement with Guy Crow of Baylor for the 2022 calendar year. There is a slight increase in his fees. He has not increased fees in a couple of years now. Increase for 2022 is relatively minor relative to the overall number. And so we can certainly discuss this after we introduce Yeah, so I would entertain a motion to authorize me to sign the letter of engagement for legal representation with Guy Crowe of Thaler and Thaler for 2020. So moved.
Second,
Conversation or discussion or questions?
Very happy that guy wants to stick around.
Yeah.
it's very helpful with the CPZR, with the comp plan process.
Good. Then all in favor of authorizing me to sign the agreement for legal representation with Guy Crowe of Thaler and Thaler, please say aye.
Aye.
Aye. Any opposed? Second item under my report is just an informational update for this board and anyone listening. I did have a meeting, or was invited to a meeting with representatives of the town of Ulysses, Grassroots Inc., and respective legal counsel, including an annexation expert, an annexation specialist firm out of Buffalo. And the conversation was at the request of both the town of Ulysses and Grassroots to sit down and discuss this process. Should the Grassroots organization choose to move forward with an annexation petition for that parcel of land that I will probably forever refer to as the Duddleston Farm, which is the piece of land behind the Sure Save, as well as the Smithwoods property that's included in the request. The conversation ran about 2 hours. Nothing was concluded, certainly. The position of Grassroots is that they feel it would be in their best interests and, in their opinion, the community's best interests if that piece of land was incorporated into the village. The town of Ulysses, at this time, at least the representatives in the room, which were Supervisor Zaylor and currently Deputy Supervisor Caitlin Olson, their position was that it may not be in the community's best interests, or certainly the town's best interests, if that were to happen. And so we spent about 2 hours discussing that. I reiterated that the village's position is that if anyone submits an annexation petition, the village would consider it. We are unable to expand our borders to the north or northwest, so that really only leaves the south and southeast. Southeast, we start to run into water pretty quickly. And so if an annexation petition were to come before this board, that we would certainly take it under advisement and give it due consideration. I did also reiterate that some of the items that both Grassroots and the Tompkins County Health Department want them to take care of with respect to water, particularly, and Grassroots also has interest in sanitary sewer development. I did state that the village does not want to continue indefinitely with the makeshift hookup at the fire hydrant for the camping site as currently used. That we would be open to supplying water to a water district if the town creates one. And we would certainly, if anyone becomes annexed into the village, provide water by right to those folks. I did also say that the village at this time would not be interested in providing services to a non-village sewer district. I don't actually believe the DEC would permit it at this point, given our sewer plant capacity and I&I issues ongoing, but that I have never had any sense, and you all are free to correct me if I'm wrong, that the village is particularly interested in expanding that particular infrastructure. So sewer outside of the village would be something that the property owner would have to take care of on their own. Water we have plenty of and are willing to sell to anyone who wants to pay. And so that was the tone and tenor of the conversation. There was some time spent on the vagaries of annexation law and what happens if petitions move forward and one municipality says yes and the other says no. We didn't spend too much time on that. So that's where it stands. There has been, again, no petition resubmitted. There was a petition submitted several months ago that was withdrawn as being incomplete. And so we're in a wait and see mode as far as whether there will be an annexation petition. Next item under my report is a reminder that at the end, as of the end of this year, so 2.5 weeks, we will have a vacancy on our ZBA. Scott Sheedley, who has served on the ZBA for 15 years, I believe, has decided to retire from that board, and I thank Scott for his long tenure of service to the village, particularly over the last few years where there were a number of zoning board related issues. And his length of experience and even-handed approach, I think we're extremely valuable. But that does mean there is a vacancy. We do not have an alternate for the ZBA, who would be a natural fit for the open seat. So that means that anyone in the sound of my voice, or the sound of this recording, who might be interested, who is a village resident, who might be interested in serving on the village ZBA should reach out to me, also email Tammy Morse, our village clerk. You can call the village office. You could email public comment at trumansburg-ny.gov. Email or contact any of the board members. You could come to a meeting.
Note in the mail
You
slot.
can log into
Village
the
office.
next Zoom meeting. You could
Comment on Facebook.
wear a sandwich board that says, I'm willing to serve on the ZBA. We are open to village
Curious
residents who want to serve in this capacity. For those who may not be familiar, the ZBA is what the law refers to as a quasi-judicial board, meaning the only time you meet is when there is something that has essentially been appealed to the ZBA to determine one way or another on a matter related to the zoning ordinance itself. But please, if anyone is interested or knows of anyone who might be interested, please let me know.
I did put that on the openings page that we've got on the website as well. So that's up there. And related to that, the UDC is interested in generally publicizing open board spots in both the town and the village. So I pointed them at that website if they wanted to push that or let people know in any sort of way.
And I did get an email from Carissa about that last week and let her know.
Great.
At the end of the year. Next item, I would like to see how we feel about reverting back to our original state of the village, beginning of the year, look at the year ahead kind of program. We are interested in doing that. We should set a date. We should set a date now.
Like February?
I would say last weekend of January, first weekend February timeframe. If, on the other hand, we prefer the summer months with the outdoor seating ability, as we did last year, or this year rather, then we can certainly do that. I'm not opposed to a twice yearly State of the Village title meeting either. I do think that attendance in the winter months has historically been higher than the attendance we got in the summer. I don't know how much of that is due to the time of year. How much of it could potentially be due to COVID concerns. So that we'll need more data points to know for sure which one is better. But I'm acutely aware of the fact that this year is almost over. And so if we want a late January State of the Village, we should schedule it now and begin to publicize it. So open to comments, thoughts, preferences.
I'll say I'm fairly pessimistic of where numbers and such are going. And I'm concerned that if we had one at the end of January, especially coming out of Christmas time, that not a lot of people are going to feel comfortable to show up to something that long inside. So my interest would be in doing it in the spring. I thought it wasn't as attended as I would have liked. I'm sure part of that for any number of reasons. It was a beautiful weekend. Maybe people had other things to do. Maybe just the new date caught people off guard. Who knows? But I'd be interested in trying that perspective another time, and if only for another year, because it doesn't look like it's going to get any better any sooner. So
I am intrigued by the notion of few meetings, and I think that also when you do that, you have an opportunity for it to be more of a community picnic and that informal presentation that we did in the summer, if you can attend or not. But I did miss the lack of attendance, and I do think that wintertime allows for more of that. And also, it's a time where you're more internal and you're thinking of things. So I think it's a great planning strategy. And I just want to point out, so I think, yeah, we just have no idea where COVID's going to be, and we should hold the possibility that we could cancel it if it seemed, I think a Zoom village meeting might not be worth it. We could consider that. But February 5th, Saturday, February 5th is really almost 2 months from now. That's a long time. So it's,
Oh, you're so optimistic.
it is though. I mean, it feels like a long time. A lot changes in a week with these COVID numbers. So I would be in favor of looking at the first week of February.
I mean, personally, I think the more meetings that we can like cajole people into coming to, the better. I think the risk that we run is if we desensitize people to the idea of a state of the village meeting. So like, well, I can't make this one. It's easier if it's biannual, maybe that happens. I don't know. I mean, it really, like with COVID, everything is kind of a crapshoot, but my general inclination would be more is better. If we can get people to come, that's kind of a win. You know, I don't think there's anything wrong with having an extra meeting where we sort of summarize where we are. And where that feels like a net gain. Unless we desensitize people to the idea of it myself. But I'm happy to go either way, I think, at the end of the day.
I would say, I think I like the idea of 2 because long-term, because I like the idea that I do think more people will gather in the winter, but it's also an opportunity to kind of share a vision and then provide a checkup on that 5 months later. Where are we at? I think the same people that attend the first one will probably attend the second one. I don't know if there's going to be some people that pick one over the other. I think if you're into it, you're into it. Maybe you get some more people in the summer. I think, however, I think I don't have high hopes that we'll have great indoor attendance this year, at least. On one hand, everything I've read is like expect a spike to finally go down at the end of January, but locally, that's when all of our students come back. And so I don't know if that'll be the case for us locally. But I do feel it's important to have a January or February meeting this year because we're in an election year. And I think it's important that the public hears from this board before they vote a month later. And that would be a shame to not have a major board event where we can talk about our work before election day. To push that off to May would be a bad precedent comparative. Not live up to a former precedent where there was a natural. Now, granted, I guess local caucuses will probably have happened already. But still, I think it's important. I think it's important for those who, for the voters to hear from us before.
One consideration with respect to attendance is unless the state legislature acts and quickly, we're going to lose our ability to do remote meetings on January 15th. So we can still broadcast, certainly. We can make a Zoom option available for members of the public, but the meeting itself, kind of a Zoom only state of the village meeting, had occurred to me as well, but won't be possible again unless something significant changes. That those portions of the law, I don't believe can be adjusted again without legislature action.
Would we be able to be in person, but only have the broadcast?
We can
But not-
certainly be in
not have
person.
people in?
We can be in person and we can have a hybrid option for attendees in person and or virtually. One way to try to, which we did last summer.
Yeah.
Tried to expand and to Ben Carver's point. I think this board, honestly, I think this board over the last 3.5 years has done more to make available access to not only meetings, but also to other communications outlets. I think more than certainly any board that I've seen in the village, but I would say as much or more than any board around, and that's not, to hurt my arm patting ourselves on the back. It's just, I think we do a good job of that. So I think continuing that as best we can, intentionally going forward, regardless of what meeting we happen to choose to hold, I think is a good idea. I am also a little bit concerned about the desensitization point of view, or concern rather. But I guess I'd rather err on that side than, I agree with that, than not holding enough meetings. I don't know how you feel about that part.
I think if we're gonna have one in the winter, I would just encourage us to have it kind of as late as we feel comfortable. I'm just being pessimistic, but I do expect that there's gonna be another spike after Christmas and New Year's. That only seems reasonable. That's then, mid-January, and as Keith pointed out, then students are back a couple weeks later. I think pushing it into February gives us a better chance of hopefully being out of the thick of things, but we really won't know until we're closer in. So I think we can pick a date. I think erring on the side of later is maybe the better bet, and then we'll see what it looks like when we get there. The village caucus is tentatively, the village Democratic caucus is tentatively scheduled on the 23rd, for whatever that's worth.
Wednesday, the 23rd.
No, it's a Sunday on January.
Oh, January.
I mean, I would say, Jess mentioned just sort of holding the idea of canceling it, which I think is a good, in today's, that's sort of where we live, right?
Yeah.
So I think if we're sort of fluid with that, and we sort of embrace the idea that this is like, COVID pending kind of a deal, and then if we just take a close look at, does this feel like it increases or decreases like overall engagement moving forward, we can give it a try, sort of pilot, why not? That would be my approach.
And I think that when I hear you guys say desensitization, I think you mean like, are we going to split the focus? Are we going to have too many events and not a critical mass of
People who
attendance?
only have capacity for one meeting a year, are they going to give up?
Right.
entirely?
I do think that there's a way to say, well, the winter meeting is really largely sort of a year in review, and are looking forward to what we're thinking of in 2022 and what are you all thinking in 2022.
Yeah.
And then a summer meeting or fall, I don't know, if whenever is an update on those things that we did, and also could be more a community gathering feel than this business meeting. And I think that makes sense to people who have any sort of a company structure in their own lives. And that's what meetings
That
are.
was my thought too. I think it's a great opportunity to kind of create some sort of community event wrapped around it. And then maybe it's the meeting portion is very brief, but it's an opportunity for people to actually just casually converse with the board, with their representatives. They can, we always struggle with childcare, right? If it was more of an event,
Right.
maybe children have entertainment and it's just more of a
Or even at the
celebratory
market,
thing.
they were running around, which is to
Yeah,
put them in.
yeah,
sharing the room.
so-
So
Yeah, that's a great point. I mean, I really like the chicken barbecue event, immediately following the summer State of the Village meeting. And the reality is, you all know, there's a lot of work that this board does. So we wish more people came to these meetings, but there are portions of the meetings which are fairly mundane. But the high level overview of the kinds of projects we have and what's on tap and how we're going to try to move forward on some of the hot button issues like stormwater. I do like the idea of providing venues for, what did you call it once? Blue sky discussion, more broader discussions of these larger items. Okay, so why don't we, if everyone's agreeable, why don't we plan on a February 5th, Saturday, February 5th? Or 12th, I guess it depends what everyone's calendar looks like.
I think that the 12th, I don't know, it could be a Valentine's Day reality.
Sure.
just because.
I like that. That's a theme.
Show your love.
Love your village.
Lean
State of
in
the
on it.
village,
Yeah.
2022.
We're gonna be heart-shaped bagels and,
There you go.
Wear red.
Red bagels, put the food dye in there.
ooh, just red velvet cupcakes for breakfast.
I'm,
Okay, I'm.
that
I'm
would
going.
actually bring some people out. Now you're talking.
Tammy's not gonna let me give
For the
cupcakes
love
for
of the
breakfast.
village.
It's not, a no.
State of
She's
the
like,
village.
whatever, girl, whatever.
So which do we want? We want the 5th or the 12th?
The fifth.
We'll try the 5th at 9 a.m. Saturday, February 5, 2022, 9 a.m. Fire Hall,
Cool.
pending our ability to hold such a meeting.
I mean,
And
not,
also availability of the fire hall. I don't know that there would be something there, but we have to
Pretty sure
check that,
it's-
right?
pretty sure it's our Fire Hall.
I think.
I know, but they don't have some special training thing coming in.
Could be a birthday party book.
I don't think there are.
I think it's worth pointing out that an in-person meeting feels vanishingly small probability wise. I think a meeting like this is possible, but that feels.
Let's just wait and see.
No, we'll certainly do, we'll certainly have a Zoom option and we'll broadcast it for members of the public. The notion that we're going to be able to hold a remote meeting, again, seems like rolling a giant stone uphill, getting state legislature to do much on short notice, but who knows?
Tantalizing process.
It's-
I mean, it's hard to imagine spike being worse than what we're dealing with right now. Not gonna work. But, and they're, we're not, we're not being told that we have to limit attendance. So it would feel like we can at least offer the hybrid option. People all choose to stay home, which is, understandable. We should at least not be in a position where we'd have to cancel. Now, any of our board members don't feel comfortable being there, and they say we can't
Share that.
not
story.
be home, then that makes things a little bit.
Well, but the reality is, it's not, it's inconvenient for some, but it's not difficult to cancel a meeting on short notice.
Okay.
Awfully hard to put one together on short notice. So plan on February the 5th, and we're comfortable going through with it, then then we'll not have lost anything. If we do end up canceling it, we'll have, I would say, at least a week's notice. To let folks know that they have to postpone.
And that would mean 2 mailings, 2 postal mailings for the clerk to execute, 1 postcard announcement and 1.
I think a cancellation will require a mailing to every home.
Okay,
I think that'll be fairly,
just thinking of the work effort.
I think a cancellation, given more than a couple of days.
People here.
Word of mouth and even Swift 911, I mean, it would be something we could get the word out a number of different ways.
Great, okay.
So is it, Gordon, would it be possible to maybe set a date that we make a decision by? Because I will need to place orders and I generally need at least 2 weeks to do that.
Orders for food and whatnot.
Mhm.
Yeah, I mean, remind me, I mean, if we're in. If we get to our January meetings at 10. If we get towards the end of January and there's a question mark, then we'll have to make a decision. But I think scheduling the date at this point at least gives us the option to hold the meeting.
Okay, and when would you like the postcards to go out?
Tomorrow. Yeah. When do we typically 2 weeks in advance, 3 weeks, when do you do it? A month, 2 weeks in advance? A month?
I would like, we need a month to get all the, I mean, we need at least a week or 2 to get all of the agenda items together. I need a couple of
I
days to
remember
put the
when you-
postcard together. That's not a big deal.
When you sent the postcards before, is it typically a month before the meeting date? Yeah.
I would
okay.
say
Longer
3 to
than
4
that,
weeks.
We'll forget.
Right,
So what?
3 to
about
4 weeks.
Gordon, if we sent them
I think if they're mailed,
January 15th? It's too late. January 1st, about New Year's Eve, January, first week of January. Is that?
Whatever all of you want is fine. I just wanted a little direction. That was all. I can make it happen.
And we're going to announce it now. We're talking about it in a public meeting, so we're announcing it now. We'll go on the website, go on Village Facebook. I would say if they're mailed, by the 10th or 11th,
Okay.
Okay.
that's not bad.
Okay, thank you.
Everybody okay with that?
Yeah, that looks good. And then it's not like dicey trying to do a bunch of that work now to try to
Right,
get it out
well,
earlier.
between now and I would say New Year's, be thinking about agenda items that you would want to discuss,
Okay.
so that Tammy can put together the postcards.
Postcards have agenda items.
Well, if you have any ideas now, you can throw them out. I know that I have. Well, we should talk about where the zoning revision stands in process. We've just adopted the comp plan in December, so January. And in fact, I think, Ben, I think we should talk about this kind of landmark zoning document idea and the ongoing revision process thereafter. And even if we have a timeline of what's going to be covered each year, I think, just so we're explaining, re-explain, but it's explaining the idea behind the process and how we're going to execute it. Depending on where we stand with various grants and large capital projects, that'll be something to discuss. Just think about what else we want to put on.
So we should get Tammy that information we should give ourselves a deadline for that too. To get the agenda topics at least set out.
Yeah, I would say have your agenda topics in mind by New Year's, and I'll send an email around.
Okay.
You know, New Year's Day is a Saturday, so the 3rd.
I may not check my email that day.
Anytime between now and then, let's say, since along your agenda items, and Tammy can start working on the design of the card.
Cool.
Maybe we should have a design the state of the village logo contest.
Well,
Probably not enough time for that.
No.
That feels like a summer meeting item.
That's-
Oh, for the
yeah,
summer
there you go,
meeting or a student art competition and then
there
everyone
you
wins.
well, the
Okay.
summer meeting is probably going to coincide, I would hope and think, with our 150th anniversary.
You don't steal my topic,
celebration.
talking
I'm gonna leave
points.
that for you. And then the last item under my report is I would like to read a resolution recognizing Supervisor Nancy Zaylor of the town of Ulysses, who is retiring for the second time, at least from public life. She chose not to run again for supervisor. She stepping out of that role and off of the town board effective at the end of this month. We've all worked with Nancy closely on various topics over time. I want to personally thank Nancy for her desire to work closely with the village on a number of issues. I think her, even when we have disagreed in the past, I think her collaborative style is welcome. And I hope to continue that under the incoming supervisor when she takes office. But I asked Ben Carver to put together a resolution. Do you want to read it?
If you would like to, that's fine.
Just a resolution of recognition for Nancy, which I would like this board to consider.
One thing though, if I could, if you change Christmas Bureau to Community Council, in that second item there.
Okay. See if I can remember that in 10 seconds. So the resolution reads, whereas Nancy Zaylor has worked tirelessly in service to the public good in the greater Trumansburg and Ulysses community throughout her professional career. And whereas Nancy has always served the best interests of her community, both through her career choices and through volunteer service with the Community Council and many other organizations. And whereas Nancy joined the town of Ulysses board in 2012 and immediately began to make a meaningful and positive impact as a liaison to the village, the Trumansburg Ulysses Youth Commission, and village fire and EMS departments. And whereas Nancy has consistently been both a trusted colleague and a respectful challenger while working on many village and town issues over the years. And whereas through her leadership, tireless work ethic, and dedication, Nancy has been instrumental in ushering in a new era of town and village cooperation that persists to this day. And whereas as a councilperson, deputy supervisor, and supervisor for the town of Ulysses, Nancy has led with dedication and devotion to the public good at every turn. Now therefore be it resolved that the Village of Trumansburg Board of Trustees hereby recognizes and applauds the many contributions that Nancy has made to our community and local governments, and expresses our sincere appreciation and thanks for her service to our community and for her unwavering care and dedication over the course of many years in the varied roles and offices she has held. And I would entertain a motion to adopt this resolution.
So moved. Second.
Any comments?
Thank you, Nancy.
Thank you.
There are no other comments, then all in favor of adopting this resolution as read, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? And so do we want to put it on some nice paper and
Yeah.
put it in a frame? And then we will, I don't think we'll have that ready for the meeting tomorrow, right? But find a time,
We can
catch it in
Present
the
it.
office and present it to her. Great. And that wraps it up for me. Fire, TACC, ETC, CWIO.
Chang Chang. Thank you very much. Okay, so we all like to start off with the calls, and we'll start with fire because it's just on the line there. The town for November had 6 calls for 31.84 hours. The village had 6 calls for 7.8 hours. Covert 3 calls, 9.48 hours. Hector had 1 call for 90 hours. Because that was a structural fire. Crazy pants, right? And thanks for all of those hardworking volunteers. There was one mutual aid call, which was also 71 hours. So that brought up a note that there was just an increase in uptick in structural fires, which is sort of the season. So everyone get your chimney swept if you haven't already. We are working on, let's see, so the Winterfest has happened. The Letters to Santa program is really going strong. The fire company generously lent their services as volunteers at the intersections, and also the fire truck was driven by President Tim Dodge with Santa and Mrs. Claus, to the delight of many adult and child on December 4th. Although I did not get a candy cane. I forgot. So many thanks to them. They also kicked off the day with a drive-through breakfast, which was also a fundraiser. And 2 people in the community have brought up this notion of not really understanding the difference between the fire company and the fire department and the fundraising. And so I'm wondering if there's a statement we could craft to push on, maybe not the website, but on a Facebook page that says, you may have received a letter from the fire company reminding you that that is because they are a 401c3 non-for-profit. They are seeking to raise funds for their tool. How we negotiate that that's informative, so people get that there is a difference without overcomplicating it, but and letting them know that it's not the village who they already pay taxes to that is asking them to donate. That was the confusion point.
But also that we do generally fund.
Yes. Yeah.
Right, that was the question that I got was,
That-
don't we already
yes.
do this?
Right, though there is precedent historically that some items have been raised and then funds for by the fire company. So this is not abnormal. It's just not something anyone's had to think about for a very long time. So how we might be able to do that, Mayor, if you want to think about it without getting it sticky. And we do have, speaking of funds, you may all recall that there has been a radio grant in the past, and we were denied that grant as a single municipality. And so banding together with Ithaca and Enfield, and we have an MOU that we would like to have signed. And this is what I'm going to defer word to you on procedure for what we have to do that.
Right, so we have an MOU which is signed between the village of Trumansburg and the Enfield Volunteer Fire Company, not the town of Enfield. No.
I said municipalities, I apologize.
And is it city or IMD?
The city with the fire department at the top, but I guess maybe you're looking for specific.
No, that makes sense. So the city fire department is a department of the city, just like our fire department is a village department. So the MOU simply says that we will collaborate, the three of us, the three agencies, will collaborate with applying for an assistance to firefighters grant for the purpose of purchasing radios. Enfield needs 22, we're requesting 32, and the city of Enfield needs 63. So it's not a small number. Our responsibility, and the reason why this requires board approval as opposed to just the fire chief signing off on it, is that the village's portion, it is I think a 5% matching grant, so there will be roughly $100,000 outlay for the radios, which we will be responsible for somewhere between 5 and 10,000.
Which has been, that number is there. That has already been accounted for in the equipment budget. So this is not an additional.
Yes, where is that? Is that in the?
It's in the actual amount.
Yeah, I think we're actually nice.
It's not quite 10.
But the MOU is silent to the dollar amount, I see, which is
Well, it's
10% cash.
there.
That's what we do. So whatever amount we get up to the 32 radios, we are looking for 10% cash match for our portion. So I would entertain a motion to authorize the fire chief to sign this MOU with the Enfield Volunteer Fire Company and the City of Ithaca Fire Department.
So moved.
Second. Any conversation, questions, or discussion?
It's great.
Yeah, it's pretty cool. I would be so surprised if they get denied or rejected, but who knows? So,
Before we move on, we have a motion in a second.
oh, sorry.
All in favor of authorizing the fire chief to sign this MOU, please say aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? All right.
The Trumansburg Area Chamber of Commerce is still having member events. Things are really moving along. There's great participation, and I'm starting, I don't know if any of you have seen people out in public and know who's in the chamber, but they're talking to each other. There's just like, it's really good. We are also, the village of Trumansburg is a member of Tompkins County Chamber of Commerce, and Burden and I will coordinate with their representative who still wants to get some deeper information about us. I feel like that's a January concern for me right now. Okay. And so the village, it's ETC. I had mentioned that Winterfest was a success, and huge debt of gratitude to a job very well done by Cynthia Medino, who was the event organizer, and her committee. Jen, whose last name I'm forgetting right now. Demarest, and Charmaine, whose last name I'm also forgetting.
Charm Robinette.
Thank you. Really, really worked hard.
Karen Powers, who's everything.
And Karen Powers, who is on the village EPC, so I kind of took her for granted. They did great. I hope you all were able to attend. The town got decorated. We had, I think, a real success by having the PA system. Thank you so much, Tammy. In front of Garrett's, so on Main Street, where there really was a critical mass, and I think it kept the, also, you know, Gordon and Keith did an amazing job, but just having that presence of cohesion and a sense of more coming in events was, I think, well received. The businesses all commented how they loved the time frame. Worked really well for them, although one of them commented that they didn't think it had an impact one way or the other, but that's okay. And I didn't actually hear from the chief of police if there was any trouble, so I think there wasn't. I think the road closures worked, and it wasn't, because we'd never done it so early in the day. It was a question of, would this be prohibited for traffic, and it worked out well. It was incredibly well supported by donors, and ensure that there'll be, that we can do it again next year. Does anyone want to have any specific feedback? You can email me at whatever, or you can comment now to take to the committee for next year. One other thing I think about the timing is that definitely really safe for children. Definitely, I saw a lot more little people this year than I had in the past, which may just be demographic reality of births, but they were there. It maybe made the tree lighting less a consideration, and a consideration that we did not pull off decorating Main Street the way that we have with lights and such before Winterfest. Ben Darfer and I have been talking about that, and we think that it probably makes sense for the ETC to consider what amount of public space needs decoration at what times during the year, to come up with sort of a calendar and then coordinate with the DPW like in January, so they can plan their work and do the detail of that without having to think of, well, which lights do you want to use? Where are you going to put them? Like, just have a plan put in. So unless anyone sees any big red flags with that, I think that makes a lot of sense. We also talked about how ETC might give support to taking care of T-Bird in a similar way if they had those needs, and what the relationship between DPW and taking care of T-Bird versus ETC. I don't know that we have a conclusion about that. Do you want to speak more of that?
Yeah, I think that the biggest thing I've heard, well, I think there's two things that I've heard. One is helping move and place the planters or remove the planters every year. They're rather large and unwieldy. I do think the DPW is open to being more involved in there. We just have to sort out the logistics of that and kind of making sure they've got the support that they need. I think the other thing that we talked about is conceiving of the materials for taking care of T-Bird, like potting soil and plants and so forth, as being a village expense, because the village putting out beautification of our main street. And so that's a kind of an ongoing conversation that I think plays into budget season, recognizing that some of that can get reimbursed through the beautification grants if and when those return, but they're not returning next year. So there's a little bit of a conversation there. But if that were to go forward, I think we were talking about that ETC might take a little more ownership of those kind of details of just sorting out reimbursement and purchasing
If it went in that direction.
if we go in that direction.
So something to think about, but definitely the notion of ETC, especially because Karen Powers is on it. When do you all want to put the planters out? Let's coordinate with DPW and being that funnel of information,
Right.
instead of just the DPW commissioner.
Right. Yeah, I think in general, kind of with an eye towards ETC is being the plan and the design side of where planters go, when do they come out, when do they come back, that sort of a thing, and then the DPW can assist with the actual implementation of that.
So to that end, Dusty, Ben and I are going to meet on Wednesday to look at what we actually have for decorations for winter, and then develop a plan of where we might like to go this year and then in 2022. So I will send you, here's our inventory and here's where I think we could get. If it's in the 2022, we'll wait until we have our next DPC committee meeting to talk about, do you want to look at banners? Do you want to, what's the budget going to be? Good. Okay. Because there's been, I'm sure we've all heard, like, people miss the lights. They really want to see, and the businesses and Winterfest going to the businesses and saying, hey, you have an empty storefront, can we decorate it for you? And people saying, sure, it helps. But I think pulling that together is important. So we will have a meeting after the holidays of the ETC, and we will look forward to that, thinking about our general decoration plan as a village. And June is the 150th anniversary of Trumansburg being incorporated as a village. And so the mayor has pointed that date out to us as something that's significant and an opportunity again to come together. We all, I think, we conceived of it before Winterfest, but that really, again, it was really a great time. And I think it reminds us that we do come together really well And we have all this public space that's open that we can safely engage. So look for more about that, and also an opportunity for you to think of what you want to do to celebrate that. Do you want to say more?
No, I think it's just something that we should keep in mind in terms of, Winterfest has an obvious focus and a time of year focus. June is a tricky month. July is a tricky month. August less tricky, but it's hot. But I do think we should do something this summer, and whether it's a series of events, coordinating with the farmers market. I mean, I think in all of the above approach to a season, if you will, of event planning
Yeah.
to celebrate the village and all things village that makes it a place that we all choose to live. And certainly not emphasize 150th anniversary of the incorporation of the village is really a governmental action, but it is kind of the point in time from which the villages that kind of currently exists began. So I think a celebration of that, especially coming out of the last 2 years, I think would be nice for the community. So
I agree, and I think we have identified that, there's Porch Fest, and we have the unveiling of the giant, that there is a sense to celebrate the seasonality of these next set of things that we do. There's some talk, also the sign project has this targeted. It should probably be done by the 150th celebration, so we're still working on that. It's been tabled but not forgotten. What did I want to say about? I guess I maybe just lost it about other events. So we'll come back later. I think that's really it. Does anyone have any ETC questions? Okay.
I think a sesquicentennial celebration. Hopefully with Porch Fest weekend, so it's fun, since it's a Porch Fest is going to be planned anyway,
Yeah.
to be able to just piggyback off that.
And I am liking that notion of a string of events, like there's a weekend of events, which is something that the crit was sort of like, oh, if we could do something on Sunday and more people would come and stay, because there's 2 sets of races. I don't know where that's going to end up, but that same notion. So to that end, I've already heard from Frank Scola from Rotary about when a good day for duck race would be. And there's some talk also in a faction of the Rotary maybe pulling off winter games. And that hasn't gelled. It's all still in theory. But again, this notion of, do you want to have winter games around the state of the village then? Like there are these moments that we've already sort of identified. And I think, again, a real opportunity for Porch Fest time to do more.
this year we unveil Pizza Fest.
Pizza Fest.
I'll talk to anybody that wants to listen about that idea.
Talk to Fabrizio first.
I've talked to him.
Oh, good.
He's on board.
Oh, good. Okay, so I'm just gonna give you a little update on Clio then. So this fellow Nate Launer came to speak to Clio about the harmful algal blooms in 2021 and just had a really dense deck in his presentation about what happened. And there was an increase in the size and the frequency of harmful algal blooms in Hugo Lake. In part, he wanted to point out because there was increased reporting. More people are engaged in the project and paying attention and know what to look for. So they did not posit any theories as to why those have gone up. That was not part of this presentation. It was really just a set of data points with maps. If anyone is interested in finding out what that map looked like or where they were, you can let me know. That something like really interesting to me was that October was the highest month of increase, which to me just sounds like funny because it seems later in the season, but it was warm. Yeah, and then again, all those things. There is, by the way, a sense that it is in no means simply an agricultural reality. Like there's a lot of factors going on, which was interesting for me to consider. Lots of information about what comprises.
Was it one of our warmest Octobers?
Probably.
There were 70-degree golf days.
We don't for Halloween. I'm no scientist, but
Those are the future. Well, just in terms of, if it was the largest increase, that would be year-over-year increase, right?
Yeah, like 26 in October. In 2020, there was one.
Right, so.
In 2018, there were none. And there were 18 blooms. So we're talking also about all of Cayuga Lake. 18 blooms on October 6th. Yeah, so because there was no wind, and it was after major rainstorms. So that is definitely something that has been.
We did have a lot of.
Yeah, right. So really fascinating stuff. A lot of dense science. And also, I guess it just sent home for me that, especially if you are new to this area and you're like, what? It just looks like dirty water. You're not really sure, is this really a thing? It's actually really toxic. And it's not a good idea to ignore the warnings of swimming there. There is a meeting on Wednesday. I might not be able to attend, but she's got a really good agenda and access to materials, so I'll make sure I have an update. Because she is Ms. Graper, who is the chair. Okay, that's all I got.
Are there non-harmful algal blooms?
Probably, but I don't know. Yeah, we didn't talk about those.
There's algal blooms of all kinds.
I mean, there's algae in your
there's-
pond.
But there's algal blooms in Florida that like. Yeah, there's totally, I don't know off the top of my head, but there's like colored algal blooms.
For the beneficial algal blooms.
Beneficial.
Get typecast into thinking algal blooms are bad.
So they have to
Realize I was just
contain a
supporting your
certain.
joke. That
No,
was-
it's
that
not a
was
joke.
error.
I was actually genuinely curious because I didn't really hear the term algal blooms until I heard about harmful algal blooms. So I didn't know if there was.
So that is a great question. So there are blooms that do not contain the microcystin toxin. And some kinds of algae have denser amounts of the microcystin toxin, and that is the thing that makes us sick. So you can have a small amount of that and it's not considered harmful, which does then answer the question that, yeah, there are blooms that are not always. I wrote teeny tiny notes. Did I actually tell you that? Yeah, let me just say this one last number. In 2018, there were 40 total blooms. In 2021, there were 102.
What, 102?
Not all of them were toxic in 2021, which is more than double in 3 years.
When did we really start identifying them? Kind of
I don't know. That's a good
reference that,
question I
that
can ask.
we're looking more, it seems like now than we did before. So I'm just curious, like when they were,
When the data points start, and they only went back far enough to.
seems fairly recent that I started first hearing about like closing down the swimming
Yeah.
areas for algal blooms.
Let
harmful
me
algal
ask.
blooms.
That's a great question. Okay.
Any other comments or questions for Jessica? Okay, EMS Youth Street Tree Advisory.
So EMS, we will, as usual, get into an executive session. I never know how much to share about the personnel stuff, but we are still without an EMS administrator. We're sort of debating sort of organizational structures and how to best tailor those for long-term sustainability and operability of the department. But we'll get into the details of that later. Calls for Covert 29, Hector 4, Mech 5, Village 18, and Ulysses 32. About 5% to mutual aid. Those are intriguing for a number of reasons. We had some sort of reporting difficulties earlier. The Village number seems to be down now. We had been up for most of last year, so I think in our last cycle, our percentage of the budget, I think, was likely inflated by reporting error. So we will now likely be returning to something like the right size on that front. I also spoke with Alvin White, the Hector supervisor, a couple weeks ago now. God, maybe it was a year ago. My brain is working, but in any case, we have been reporting, we have had a problem where Hector and Mecklenburg calls are being switched. It's somewhere between us and medics. We thought at first that it was on our end. We have now corrected. I mean, we've redone the way that our reporting works. We added a QA level so that all of the location codes get reviewed a second time. I have been going in and triple checking those. So we know that it's working on our end. It is still not working on MedX, or when Hector gets the bill, it's still flipping. So we're still working on that out. For the tree committee, I have just started the annual Tree City application, so hopefully that will go through as smooth as it has historically. As sort of a brief reminder, since I only talk about this once a year, the whole purpose of that is that we can hopefully get grant funds, which hopefully are being applied for under the auspices of the town environmental committee. I'm forgetting the name of that. I haven't actually heard a report from them in terms of progress on that front, but that is the hope. The Youth Commission, I'm trying to think if there is an update. We had sort of a sparse meeting, our last meeting. I think at this point we were working through what's the county called the vitality checklist, which is basically how the committee works and do we have sort of systems and protocols in place to maintain the committee sort of long term. Our next step, I think, at this point is crafting a DEI statement and sort of strategizing and planning for how that gets implemented in practice. So if anyone out there in the world has any thoughts or input or experience with things like that, please reach out. I don't know what to think.
You want to say anything about the CEQA report?
Sure. I mean, I'll just share it with everyone when we get there. I have also, as well, intriguingly, so CUIO is also working with a CEQA team, which is the program I'm in at Cornell. So I have seen the CEQA report that you were going to miss on Wednesday, but it's very good. Don't worry, but you'll get it all from the report. But so I have been working in sort of a weird, very strange kind of a role for me. I have been the internal CEPA liaison to Rorden, who is the outside liaison for an EMS project that I'm working on, where I'm sort of an external, internal consultant. And it's been a very, it's actually been a really great opportunity, I think, to like the things that I deal with our EMS agency sort of in the thick of it and kind of dealing with how we operate as an agency, to then just zoom way out and see that these are like, there's really common threads here for every agency across rural America, which is of course no surprise. But then we've also been sort of digging into the data in Tompkins County over the course of several years. And the one sort of high level conclusion that I think really struck me was we looked at response times across the county, so for different districts in the county. What we found was that in 2017, the year following Slaterville ambulance's closure, there was a significant lag in Slaterville in terms of response time. So I don't know the numbers offhand, but on the chart it was red. Now that red has moved from Slaterville to the rest of the county. So essentially, Bangs has been forced to sort of shift to cover Slaterville because they have the countywide CON. So they have reallocated resources there. We're increasingly pulled, to doing standbys at CMC and things like that. Similar effects are obviously happening throughout the county. So we're all kind of shifting to cover Slaterville, even though we're, miles and miles away. If you zoomed out even further, we don't have the data for this, but you could also see, I'm sure, an impact on call response times in Romulus or other places that we go to provide mutual aid. So the sort of ripple effect of this tiny ambulance department, which really was just a couple people, shoestring budget, the impact of them closing has just this gigantic ripple effect that, I mean, it stretches sort of the community resources for an entire region. So it's kind of mind-boggling to see that. I don't know if there's any other big takeaways. I mean, I think maybe the biggest takeaway is that there's also sort of simultaneously this bill in the state Senate that is hopefully going to be signed before the end of the year, although it's, we're kind of in do or die time right now. But that will create an EMS task force for the state. So we are hoping that the release of our report coincides with the creation of that task force, and we can sort of shape and frame that conversation a little bit in a way that hopefully results in funding being allocated to municipal, or not necessarily municipal, but just EMS agencies, local EMS agencies that hopefully can help kind of create and sustain a robust, like, full network of EMS service in the state. That's really hope. But I don't know, it's intriguing. I'd be happy to share. I can share the report. I mean, it's sort of long and data heavy and weird, but
I think it would be helpful, you know, this board has not really been kept up to speed on it because it's been a graduate school project, but kind of the genesis of all of this started in TCOG. So I sit on the Emergency Services Subcommittee for TCOG, and fire and EMS are a constant conversation, much more so than law enforcement, even given the last couple of years' attention to law enforcement. It's always how do we keep our volunteer fire companies staffed? We actually are bucking a significant trend everywhere in terms of our staffing. Those areas of the county that do have well-staffed volunteer fire companies, you'll often have a municipality with contracts with multiple fire companies. They're not all evenly staffed, and the coordination is not always great. And then, of course, ambulances is a known issue. I had a conversation with a couple of assembly folks many months ago about this idea of needing some state assistance for things like particularly municipalities that pay for EMS or have paid departments, and helping to support those. Aside from kind of the catch-all where we just need more volunteers. These are two senior members of a couple of committees, and they were very friendly and affable, and clearly they run for office regularly because they know how to have a friendly conversation. But when it got down to kind of brass tacks, they were also very forward with the big questions, which was, what is the financial lift you're asking for from the state, and how do we pay for it? And so that kind of led to this idea of, okay, if we at least now maybe have a half of an ear of some folks in Albany, we need to be able to present them with some hard numbers. And so the TCOG subcommittee, one of the members of the committee is actually the lecturer in this particular SEPA class. Because the world is this big. The world gets smaller every second. And so he thought it would be a good idea to have me come talk to this class, which he says, it's Dan Lamb, who's the deputy supervisor over in Dryden. He says he normally has anywhere from half a dozen-ish people in this class, and this year he has 33. So they need projects, right? So I went and spoke to the class, gave them the 15-minute crash course on all things EMS. And of course, Ben is in the class, so he was a natural resource for the class. And the folks who were interested in it have really done a great job on this project. So we'll see. It does more. There was a TCOG report that I think it was a SEPA class did in 2016 that basically looked at EMS and said, we have a problem. Okay, thank you for that. Thank you, Captain Obvious, for that observation. This report takes more of a stance of, here's more data behind what the problem actually is. And here are maybe some potential remedies. So hopefully, well, it will be released publicly at some point, and hopefully can drive a larger conversation. That Senate bill that Ben referred to would, if the governor signs it, would authorize or mandate the New York State Fire or something authority and the health department to establish a panel to study rural EMS services, which is key. It's outside of metropolitan areas. That bill was delivered to the governor's desk on Friday. So there's a formal presentation process, which I wasn't aware of. And basically, once the bill is formally presented to the governor, this was this past Friday, she has 10 or 14 days, I forget which, to either sign it, veto it, or put it in the drawer. If she puts it in the drawer, it becomes law, which is interesting. So the hope is she signs it because that gives an affirmative approval to it. I don't see a reason why she would veto it. That would be an interesting development. And if she just leaves it on her desk, then it becomes law under this particular procedure. So we will wait and see. I guess that takes us to Christmas, and we'll find out whether we all get a Christmas present in the form of a committee that hopefully will be a committee that actually does investigation, and research and comes up with recommendations, which is not always the case, but we're hopeful.
So that's encouraging. And also, I feel like what you said, Ben, about this notion that a small department, like one ambulance, 2 guys in a rural area, the ripple effect of that speaks to, in a way, us, and I don't want to undermine how much money is actually needed to make EMS happen statewide, but a small amount of money can actually impact a lot of people. So let's do something, right? You don't,
What
it's
sort of,
approachable. And I wanted to link that to this
Yeah.
notion of, and privatized ambulance services are not the answer, because then they get stretched and it pulls the other. So
So
that
it's,
does.
it is a little bit trickier than that, because if
Sure.
you, the money required, so if you think of it in terms of like a broader conception of money, like community resources, they still had to pay for the ambulance, they just fundraise. So it's, in terms of tax dollars, it's non-existent funding. But the
Okay.
reality of it is still, and if you quantified, you know, the amount of hours they put in and the time if they were paid staff. So if you, the community resource, whether it's money or volunteer time and donations, is the same.
I guess so where my brain went was like, hey, Albany, we're not saying you
Yes.
need to build an EMS system to serve
Yes.
Ithaca. You can help with these little points that are
Absolutely,
approachable. Yeah.
absolutely. And it would have taken very little to sort of put them on the other side of the.
On the other side of failure, yeah. Not their own failure, sorry. No, stop talking.
the resistance in Albany, other than the money, the resistance continues to be a belief, and this is where the super report really helps. And hey, people have different opinions about Cornell, but when you have a well put together report with a big Cornell logo on it, it does lend some credence to the argument. So
Yeah.
the
I
big
did
resistance,
put a big Cornell logo. Just to be clear, I did that.
it's a land grant. One of the big
Yeah.
resistance pieces in Albany, which actually Comptroller DiNapoli was in Ithaca a few weeks ago, and this topic came up. The resistance is that EMS is viewed as rescue and fire departments, which are ultimately a county's responsibility to coordinate.
Mm,
This report does a good job. And my contention has been for a couple of years now that EMS somewhere along the line evolved to healthcare.
mm.
And I mean, if you've ever been either as a patient or you can go on fire hall and check out the equipment on the ambulance, they are mobile emergency rooms. And so if we can convince enough people of the truth that EMS is in fact healthcare, and it changes the tenor of the conversation a little bit. You know, you can't even, regardless of whether it's a good idea or not, you shouldn't talk about healthcare for all. You're not going to treat EMS as healthcare. You know, frontline emergency care for people where they're having the event before they ever get to the emergency room. So that's hopefully something that will change in Albany as part of the conversation. But I'm hopeful that the SEPA report will be
Fingers
a driver
crossed.
to that.
Good, thank you.
Anything else? All right, DPW, water, sewer, CPZR, and farmers market.
Sure. I'll start with the DPW water sewer at the top. So big items for the past month was leaves and paving, as is wont in October, November time. What month is it even? But leaves are all picked up. That seemed to work particularly well this year. Stopping at Thanksgiving was a good choice as it snowed significantly the following week. And the paving happened relatively quickly, so that's all put to bed and things are in a good spot. I did want to thank the DPW for their part in preparing for Winterfest. I know they put in a lot of time, especially with a skeleton crew, as we've had some people out on medical leave. The farmers market tree is now down, as we kind of mentioned during the looking at the abstracts. Alan Vogel and a group are working on ideas, sketches, plans for what might go on top of the stump or near around it, something like that. I know they're in contact with a number of residents, the farmers market board. My impression is that they will likely come chat with this board next month as well. So stay tuned for pieces moving forward there.
So there's not going to be something erected without the board seeing it first.
Yeah, no, that would be this board's decision ultimately, but they're making sure there's input from all manner of people. I think
Sure.
my impressions are going to reach out to you specifically earlier than just the next board meeting as well.
Oh, okay.
Yeah.
But I think that everyone might want to know what's happening with the village property before it happens.
Yeah, it will, it won't be, well, it won't be happening over the winter, certainly.
Okay.
But no, I think, I mean, Alan knows the players.
I just want to know if I can,
Sign
am
off.
I gonna be able to climb on the steps?
They might be, yeah,
I should get that in now.
if you've got, well, I mean, if there's, certainly if you've got ideas or
Yeah.
hopes or dreams or things you don't want to see specifically, reach out to Alan or probably Alan's probably the right person to talk to, but you can also talk to me or anyone else. I'm kind of loosely involved. I think Royden's been seeing some of the emails as well. So that's more to come. And then obviously the other big conversation is stormwater. There's now a stormwater project page up on the website detailing some of the results and reports we've had from MRB. I think in part encouraged by Sarah Adams, who was here last month and suggested that there's also links out to various ideas on rain gardens and so forth from Cooperative Extension, as well as the county and a couple other places. And there's also information there on how residents can send reports of stormwater issues. In talking with MRB, really more data is good data. So if people run into issues, probably not as much now, but certainly once we get back to spring melt and so forth, you know, feel free to send us images, pictures. Farther away is better, so they can kind of see the whole issue in context and, you know, just kind of a date and a time and a location sort of thing. But all that information is up on the website for people. So if we hear of anybody who's, you know, having an issue with stormwater, feel free to send them that way and they can report that in. So on the CPZR side, we're getting very close to wrapping up Article 3, which is the residential zoning section. As Roden kind of pointed out, we're starting to have a framework for what are the chunks we want to get done, what years do we think those chunks will land, that sort of a thing. The first chunk I'm anticipating is Article 3, as well as there's some sections towards the end that pertains specifically to residential zoning in the like kind of supplemental area, Section 7, for whatever that's worth. So we'll work through those and then have that, you know, kind of put together, bundled together, and then look to provide a clean draft with just those changes to this board as well as for council's review in the first half of next year is the aim, the hope. And that would allow us to then kind of go very quickly from this comp plan to a first pass of a zoning update. I think likely covering the biggest pieces that most people are concerned about was the residential. And then we can have those kind of broader conversations with the community, review it ourselves. And at the same time, the CPZR committee will then move on to things like commercial area zoning, probably looking at Airbnbs as a second piece as well. And so I have a bit of a draft of a list that I can share. Actually, I'll share with everyone here, and then we can talk about more at the State of the Village if we're able to hold it. Just to give people a sense of where that's all going. But the intent really is to have it kind of be annually another section and giving the sense that we are continuing to go back to this, continuing to change it, continuing to hear feedback, incorporate that back in. And there's nothing from stopping us to say like we adopt something and it just, something's not sitting right. And we realize that 6-12 months later, including that as a bit of a one-off, you know, as we continue to march forward with these other pieces. So that's the hope there. Just because I know we've talked about having kind of trying to parallelize the work of it. So we do have a subcommittee now looking at the specific question of multiple small units on a lot, which is what you think of when you think of a mobile home park, that fits under that, but there's also other types of development, cluster developments and so forth that all kind of fall under that umbrella. So there's a desire to kind of rationalize a couple small pieces that are all talking about similar overlapping issues, bringing that together. So that's what that subcommittee is looking at. And then finally for the farmers market, so I was in touch with the president of the market board. They're starting to work through their budget for next year. they've put a significant amount of effort into fundraising this past year. So they now have funding from the town as well as Tompkins Trust, a couple other larger areas. So I'm curious to see what their budget looks like. I know we pushed them, so, with a real effort to offset the increase that the village has put in over the past couple of years. So I'm curious to see how that'll all play out. They would like to continue. So I talked with them about this idea of kind of a friends of the market and or making the market a nonprofit market. Debbie, the market board president, actually has some experience with taking a market to a nonprofit status, and it's kind of soured on the idea. It wasn't particularly useful, and it turned, at least in her experience, it wasn't very beneficial at the end of it. It was an enormous amount of work, and it really didn't benefit kind of anyone. I throw out the idea of a friends of the market, which would be kind of a separate thing, and the market would still stay under the village, but maybe there's a different way of kind of splitting roles and responsibilities. But I think at this point, they're more interested in sticking to really solidifying the fundraising and getting a real set of processes that makes the board really sustainable and repeatable. Right now, there's a lot of turnover every year, year to year. It's always kind of rebuilding every year, and so they want to kind of get over that hump. So
are you thinking the notion of the friends of the market might alleviate some of that a little bit? Or no, it's a completely separate
I think it's a separate issue. I think it's a way of creating an entity that gives them a little more flexibility and freedom. And so far as they'd be a nonprofit, they wouldn't be underneath the village. They wouldn't have to necessarily work through some of the arcane rules and regulations that coming under a village requires you. But I think it's also a way of creating a bit of financial independence. So kind of saying, let's give all of the music, fundraising, scheduling, planning, put that under a friends of the market, have it be its own separate thing, not have to worry about how does that all play in with village budgets. And if you fundraise in May, then it disappears in June, but it doesn't really disappear, but it kind of does. And all that kind of jazz. I still think there's an interesting play there, but I think the market board is interested in focusing on really solidifying the base of the market and the fundraising. And my take, at least for now, and this depends a little bit on seeing the budget, is I think my primary concern is offsetting the increase in budget that we provided. And I think the structure of the market is a bit of a secondary concern. As long as we see that the proper effort being put in there, I'm not too particular about if and when, any particular structure comes together. So
Has the current manager agreed to do 2022?
Yes, I guess I'm not sure entirely like 100% formally,
Okay.
but informally, the current manager is interested in being a long-term manager for the market, which is a
That
really
was a
wonderful.
successful reworking of that position.
Yeah, we found the right person. She's done an incredible job. So that's all seeming pretty good. So that's kind of what we'll start to see more of and have those conversations over the budget period. The last thing is just as a interesting FYI, they're interested in looking at a farmer's market, a winter's farmer's market, not this year, recognizing that that's the kind of planning time for that was months past already. But starting to look towards 2022, 23, thinking about different locations that might happen and so forth. So that would be an interesting idea to see that continue to grow in that way. And that's all I've got.
Any other questions for Ben? Okay, police, Keith.
We'll begin with the report that I had opened and now it seems to have disappeared. So let's see. For November 2021, we had 198 calls for service, seven calls for service outside the village. In terms of our criminal investigations, we had 1 larceny and theft. We had 3 domestic disputes that all resulted in an arrest. We had 1 harassment and 2 frauds, thanks to the community who helped with the publicizing of the security footage of the person who passed a fraudulent $100 bill at Burnberry. So we were able to apprehend that person. And no other major report incidences to report in addition to those. Do have 2 items that the department would like to purchase that requires approval. One is I apologize, these aren't in the Dropbox, they're hard copies. The first is a radar system for the new police car, which is necessary to record speeds. So quote for that is $2,391.80. I have another purchase, but I'm assuming that we do
Which
these.
account is it coming from?
We would like it to come from contractual.
We don't need board approval for that dollar amount out of contractual.
Okay,
You can approve it, or I can.
okay.
I'm not sure you should approve it just because it comes from a company called Stalker.
A little was joking with Chief Nelson about that. Interesting name for a radar company.
Transparency and mission, I like it.
That's what it is. Well, then if we don't need approval for that, we might not need approval for this other item, which is a gun locker. Without revealing too much about how we store some of the larger police rifles and other equipment.
And actually, I take that back. You said it was over 2,000?
Yeah.
Yes.
$300.
All right, so we will need board approval on that.
Okay, well then I will seek approval. Now, it should be mentioned that we are expecting $6,300 to come back from the sale of a vehicle. And so, you know, in the broader picture, chief expects to basically that money will cover some of this. Or some of that money will cover these expenditures. So yes, it's $2,391.80.
Okay, so then I would entertain a motion to approve spending up to, we'll call it $2,400.
Yes.
From the police contractual line for the purchase of a radar unit for the new police vehicle.
So moved.
Motion, we have a second?
Second.
Motion and a second. Now, any discussion? Hearing none, then all in favor, please say aye.
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 Any opposed? Okay,
So yes, the gun locker. Again, we don't want to reveal too much about the layout of the department in the office, but needless to say, chief has been, what's that?
we don't want to reveal anything.
We don't want to reveal anything, but she feels that we could benefit from a more secure storage area for some of our larger firearms and other police devices. And so this cost for this locker is $1,699.99.
That one we do not need.
So we do
board
not need approval for that.
Is there like a delivery? That wouldn't be that much.
It will be delivered.
Yeah.
The real spectacle will be seeing a 500-pound locker get up a flight of stairs. If anyone's bored that day.
But they're new
Yeah,
stairs.
good. Good thing.
We have checked with Tom Myers to make sure the floor will withstand
withstand
these,
the weight.
and so I'm happy to report that it will. We expect that it will. If not, we have a scene out of a movie.
No one can
coming
stand right
soon.
next.
That's right. Okay, well, thank you for that. Lastly, I just wanted to, and after I kind of summarize this, I'll let the mayor add anything he wants because he's been part of this discussion too. You may or may not have seen a recent news article in the Ithaca Journal. It also appeared as a discussion topic in a local Trumansburg Facebook group. And the article centered around a relatively new database of New York police disciplinary records. In the summer of 2020, new legislation was passed in the state, basically saying that you could foil disciplinary records of police departments. And so this database is essentially trying to collect those things. Starting kind of from the end and moving back, what raised concern in the community was that if you looked at that article and you looked at the status of all of the different police departments in the county, you would see Trumansburg listed as no acknowledgement. This agency has not provided an acknowledgement of this request despite multiple follow-up messages and a letter from our attorneys. The kind of facts of the matter are that one, based on Guy's recommendations, Joe responded verbally on the phone with the representatives of the news agency. So the request came in from an agency by the name of Muck Rock, based out of Massachusetts. So not exactly your household news agency. I did some investigating. Turns out this is basically a company that was hired by Gannett to go out and get all of this data. Village attorney's concern was over the security of how they wanted us to input our information, and the recommendation was not to use their site, which is why we showed up as no acknowledgement, despite the fact that there was actual verbal acknowledgement of which was that we have no disciplinary records to report, at least in Chief's tenure.
Right.
Now, Chief did acknowledge that he will dig into records that may or may not have been filed in the regime before him. But he acknowledged that would take a considerable amount of time. So that was our response. And because we didn't use their software to reply, we showed up as no acknowledgement. Now, what's interesting is if you look at other municipalities, I'm not going to call them out by name, or this is not a critique of them at all, but you will see other statuses like no status available, a records request will be sent to this agency in 2022. Why we got the stern not complying with us type of message, and they just got, we'll follow up in 2022. All that means is somebody from that department probably went in and basically said no response or something like that. So the important thing to know is, just from the community standpoint, is the department is no way trying to dodge transparency. We're actually going to talk about this at our next LEAPS committee meeting. So I just want the community to know that there was a response given. And to be perfectly transparent, Guy Crow, could not have been less impressed with the way this information was asked for.
Sure.
And there was in his determination, and I'll let Rory speak to this a little bit more. As many of you probably know, we have a standard FOIL request for the village. They did not request our information by way of that vehicle, right? And so, and they chose not to go that route. And so, the recommendation to Joe from council was like, this is not a valid FOIL request. But, you know, again, Joe verbally gave the information they were looking for anyway. But again, but that's why we showed up. There's no acknowledgement. When we did acknowledge. And so, you know, I kind of belabor this all, but I do so because, you know, I think we've made considerable efforts and great strides in being a transparent department. And I don't want anyone in the community to think that, you know, we've done all that. We went through the reform process. We have this LEAPS committee, and all of a sudden we're going to stop. We're going to withhold, you know, information to protect ourselves. You know, so Bert, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add on that.
No, I mean, that basically covers it. I will just, the only part I would add is that New York State Freedom of Information law is very specific in how information must be requested. And there are a lot of requirements within that particular law. If anyone is curious or has a hard time sleeping at night, it's Public Officers Law, Article 6. And the Freedom of Information law exists so that members of the community or anyone in the public can access agency records. There are specific carve-outs in the law for which an agency can deny that request. And police personnel records used to be an exception that one could deny a records request for. That has since been repealed. A couple of the major parts of Freedom of Information law. One is the request has to be in writing, in a format and based on rules promulgated by the agency. So obviously there's lots of agencies of different sizes. The city of New York is a lot bigger than the village of Trumansburg. So there's a process that says anybody who wants information which you are entitled to under Freedom of Information, this is how you request it. That was not followed. And so just because a news agency stamps their feet and pouts and says, we need this information, and here's a letter from our attorney saying that we're entitled to it, doesn't necessarily mean that that's the way to go about requesting it. And it's important to understand that, not because in this case, our agency has anything we don't want to disclose, but if we don't follow the same process for person A as we do for person B, now the agency is in the position of selectively deciding what information to release. And so part of Guy's stance at the time was, this isn't a FOIL request, so don't respond to it. Chief took it upon himself in an attitude of wanting to be transparent and grant disclosure of this information, to reach out to people verbally, and that's fine as far as it goes. But I'll leave it to others to muse as to why an agency of the media is painting things a certain way.
It
So
sells papers
That could be part of it.
or
And I-
whatever kids read these days.
Yeah, and I just, again, if this meeting lane, and I actually did, you know, offer a little bit of a quick bit of clarity on this Facebook thread, not wanting to get in any kind of a debate on Facebook, but just offer a tidbit of information about that we did respond. But more importantly, what I said was, and I'll say again, you know, I believe in several people on the thread did say this as well. Chief Nelson has a very good record of responding to public inquiry. And so if you have a question about something you see like this, please reach out to him, reach out to me, reach out to Rorden. No one's going to ignore your request for, you know, more information on what you read in the news. You know, we'll always tell you as much as we can. And it's a lot more productive to see something in the news, ask us directly about it, and then report out to the community what you learned, versus drop it in a thread without knowing the answer, letting people speculate, getting people concerned. And, you know, when I offered a little bit of explanation and basically said, if you want a lot more details, one, you could come to the LEAPS meeting or email us directly and we'll give you more details person to person. And no one took me up on that. So always happy to, you know, to have a conversation. It's, you know, it's just rarely going to be on a social media channel.
Yeah, also let's point out that the FOIL request for the village of Trumansburg is 1 page of short explanation and then 1 page of request. Like, it is not this like insurmountable thing
Right.
to do it.
Well, I'd love to throw a different idea out. Just, I recognize that we don't want to kind of play favorites, but I wonder if we make more work for ourselves by not perceiving this as a FOIL request and responding as if it were one, which is to say there are no records. I get that Guy is pushing us in a direction of like very much crossing our T's and dotting our I's, and I appreciate that for his work, but it seems like we've only just made more work for ourselves by having to then explain it to every other person who then finds this and doesn't hear the background and doesn't understand or doesn't bother to ask or just sees that this is happening. When, as you just pointed out, Jess, like the FOIL request is really just who are you? What are you requesting? Like but in a
And now it's a
specific
documented
one.
record. I think it's important. It actually makes me feel really squirmy that information could just get shared at the
Well,
discretion.
So there's,
I mean, there's a
Without
specific,
the
they
FOIL.
clearly made a specific request with letters from attorneys. Like, I guess I wonder at what point are we quibbling over the precise format of the request? And maybe I'm missing details and maybe where you can fill me in.
I actually don't disagree whatsoever with the fact that it creates more work for us. It should have been over in 30 seconds. The big piece that Guy was, and he actually gave a very Guy-esque email response, which we didn't, Joe didn't send to the other attorney, and now I kind of wish he had. But the key point was the news agency was requesting and then further through their attorney insisting that this information must be produced and input into their website and database. And that is completely contrary to freedom of information. Freedom of information law says that whatever records we are required to produce will be provided to them either in electronic media or print. And so just the notion or the concept that we would have our chief of police log in to an alien website and input, it's police, so everybody has a notion of what that means today, but it's still an employee's personal information into a third-party database of an agency, which at the time we knew nothing of, was just a non-starter from minute one. It would be like asking for, there's a lot of personnel information that is technically public record, salaries, wages, hours worked, that, yeah, people are entitled to it, but you have to request it a certain way. In a lot of that reason is for our own record keeping as to who is requesting. So yeah, I don't disagree that we end up spending way too much time, energy, bandwidth in attorney's hours on something that could have been much, much simpler. And maybe should have been much, much simpler. But I'm very surprised that some of these municipalities responded. If in fact they responded by inputting information into this website. That also opens up a whole host of issues from a collective bargaining standpoint. Who are you providing my union members information to, and in what format? Security being no small.
I think part of the reason that idea came up was I am looking at the other ones in Tompkins County, and all of them outside of Ithaca PD simply said we don't have any records, and that's the only thing that's there. So there were no records uploaded. Ithaca PD does say that they provided records but have not been uploaded, so
It must have provided it physically.
probably provided it physically. So I'm just interesting to see how other municipalities are kind of handling it, and it does, because of that, then look a little bit askew on our response and the way of handling it. I will also say that even the no responsive documents are in bright red on this page, which is egregious because that is literally saying that we don't have anything. We're not only like, no one's had a problem, so leave us alone anyhow.
Well, I'll also say, I don't think it ever occurred to Joe that him talking to someone physically on the phone
Right,
would lead to us getting branded as not acknowledging.
that's fair.
I think
In hindsight, maybe, but
yeah,
here we
I
are,
think
right.
he felt like he was going the extra mile. Attorney says, probably don't use this software.
Right.
Joe says, okay, I'll just call them and
Right.
tell them that, here's where we're at with this. And so he felt like he did his due diligence,
That's fair.
and then was a little surprised when we get the big bold did not
Right.
acknowledge despite our attorney's request. So I think there, we were a little taken back by that.
I appreciate it. I think, right, I'm glad I asked the question because I feel like
I do
I'm
tend
much
to-
more inclined now.
Sorry, but I just want to point out that in general, I do tend to agree with what Ben is saying, that I think it's one thing to give out information without being asked, but I think that in general, publicly available information is something that we should have a pretty low threshold to achieve. I'm not saying in this case, because I think in this case, Joe did exactly what I would have done on my best day. You know, like to me, that seems ideal to be like, let's deal with this person first. But I do think that in general, I think it's better to err on the side of being pro public engagement in public information. I think that's, as a matter of policy, better.
Absolutely. And also, the amount of effort it would have taken them to consult their own attorneys, email or phone call, they could have completed the FOIL request. Is what I would hazard.
And it's all moot because there's nothing.
It is in our.
It may be worth actually, though, it may be worth revisiting, you know, because that FOIL request form is from, God, probably from the eighties.
That's
It may be worth,
From the mimeograph machine.
well,
You want to revisit it?
No, it might, I mean,
let's, I don't know to throw anybody under the bus, but let's think back a couple of decades or more. There has at times in municipalities throughout the country, but particularly in New York State, I mean, there's a reason why the Freedom of Information Law was passed.
Sure.
There has been at times a tendency to make the accessing of public records difficult. So it may be time to look at it from a perspective of, rather than, I mean, FOIL requires certain pieces of information be in the request. But it might be time to say, okay, well, here's our form for the person who walks in the door. But a FOIL request may be submitted to the village clerk's office and must contain the following information or be substantially in XYZ format. And that would at least open up the possibility of someone checking up their own FOIL request or law firm or someone. That could be something we'd have to talk to the guy about it. And we want to keep it standardized. We want to make sure that we have every request is asking for specific information.
You want to revamp our form, which is online?
Revamp the form or have a side-by-side, you can use this form or you can submit your own request as long as it contains this information. Your letterhead, company XYZ, you know, if you request our information on whatever, as long as it contains this necessary information and is submitted to the appropriate person, then it will constitute a FOIL request. Again, Guy's email was very Guy-like. It's shredding of this request and not being anywhere in the same zip code as a true FOIL request.
Sure.
But maybe that's something I'll talk to Guy about.
As an aside, but maybe related, we have our first digital form on the website. And we can now continue to have more said digital forms on website.
Awesome.
I think maybe we should have put that up for the 150th anniversary. That could have been.
We're finally here.
You can now order your mulch and compost online,
Yahoo!
and we will slowly but surely move through additional forms as we
That's
go.
great. Thank you.
That is amazing.
Look, I'm looking at it. Ooh. I can even give you all my special instructions.
Yeah, there you
to
go.
open field.
Okay. Anything else for police?
No. Oh, I'll just say thank you to the department's assistance with Winterfest.
Yes, thank you. I did
And,
not forget to mention thank you to the police, probably.
I don't think the folks at home can see, but below your camera view is a room full of large garbage bags full of donations for cops, toys, and kids. So
Yay.
that's a great thing too.
I don't believe I saw any like kind of publication about that. Did I miss something, or how does that usually work?
Yeah, I don't know.
There was a, I saw something, I can't tell you where.
Yeah.
What is it that you would like to know, Keith?
Say again.
I was offering to explain it to Keith if he needed a Cliff Note version.
What a Cliff Notes version of how the Cops, Kids and Toys program works.
Well, I mean, I think I have a general sense of how it works, but yeah, more specifics would be great for I think everyone to hear.
Basically, the county Cops, Kids and Toys program works by application and referral process. So if a family needs help through the holidays, they can fill out an application and submit it to the organization. And then the donations that are made through all of the drop boxes throughout the county, as well as the police officers go shopping to fulfill all those requests. And then they're packed up and divided into districts, ours being Trumansburg and Ulysses. And actually, I think we cover part of Enfield as well. So, and then they're all distributed generally about 10 days before Christmas.
What is Love the Elves program?
We have a lot of elves going on in our house.
All right, let's see, treasurer, Vicky. You're muted, Vic.
Not a ton to really report, just trying to catch up and file and do the things that need to get done. That's really about it.
Okay. Any board members have any questions? Anything budget related questions for Vicky?
I am hoping to have the budget ready for you guys to start looking at, if not the end of this week, by mid next week.
If there are no questions for Vicky, then Tammy, clerk's report.
In your Dropbox, I have a couple of documents I need the board to take a look at and potentially adopt and move forward. 7, it looks like GI, is a letter that I sent off to the Board of Elections last week. It's just something that I do annually. It states to the local Board of Elections what terms we have up for election this coming year, which is in March, which this year is 2 trustees and the mayor position. And then at the end, bottom of the letter, you'll see that the village board will announce village elections. So I just need you to proceed with that just to get it moved along. And then the second one in your box would be 7G2, village certificate affidavit. Along with this, so this is the affidavit that I turn in annually to the Tompkins County Finance Office for the unpaid village taxes to go to our get relevied to the town and county taxes. So I've done that, but since we haven't had a board meeting since I did that mid-November, I would just ask that the board take a look at it. And then I'll pass the sign-in sheet around electronically for all of you to sign off it so I can get that back to the county. But the relevying was done. So it's just these couple of procedural things.
Okay, well, yeah, send that around, we'll sign it.
Thank you. So as you can see from the list of levies, any resolution would need to include the summed amount of, sorry, I'm trying to get back there.
Say that last part again. Your sound quality is not good.
All right, let me turn it up a little bit.
No, it's not the volume. It's muffled.
Okay, so the second sheet of the affidavit is actually the unpaid village taxes that were levied back to the county in November for the amount of $47,730.96. And I would ask the board to resolve to relevy that amount to the town and county taxes retroactively back to November 15th, please.
So then I would entertain a motion from the board to retroactively re-levy unpaid village taxes, including late fees and penalties totaling $47,730.96 to be re-levied to the 2022 town and county tax bill.
So moved.
Second.
Any discussion? Hearing none, all in favor, please say aye.
Hi.
Any opposed? Okay, you're all set there, Tam.
Do you need to read
Thank-
vacancies in the DOE?
Tammy did mention the
You
vacant.
will announce the following vacancies at the regular meeting. of the board.
Yeah, okay, sure. So pursuant to election law, I am announcing the following vacancies upcoming in the spring of 2022. Vacancies on the village board of trustees to include 2 at-large trustees seats for a 4-year term spanning May 1.
Depends.
That's the bend.
Spanning the time of April 1, 2022 to March 31, 2026, as well as the office of mayor for a 4-year term spanning
That one's you.
April 1, 2022 to March 31 of 2026. The election will be held.
That's a Tuesday.
That's a Tuesday, the 15th. Tammy, did you hear that?
Tammy, your letter says Wednesday. Should that be a Tuesday?
It should, I just validated that. Tuesday the 15th.
Yeah. Village election will be held on Tuesday, March 15th, 2022. Polls will be open from noon to 9 in this very room.
Correct, it is a Tuesday.
It says that we will adopt a resolution. Should we just resolve that right now? I don't remember ever having a resolution. but it was
We're having a resolution for polls. The hours of our polls, Tammy. Can you hear me okay, Tammy?
We can hear you.
Then I will
Do we get to determine our hours of the polls, or is it?
I've never seen that before.
I've never seen it before.
That's neat.
Because I know a lot of people that would like it to not have to wait till noon to vote.
Sure.
So my recollection of election law, is that villages can run their own elections. However, if you want the county board of elections to do it, use their hours. So county board of elections sets noon to 9 for local. Does Q Heights do their own? No, county board of elections. do theirs. So I'll follow up with Tammy on this.
It's the county BOE that runs it, or?
Sorry about that. I lost my sound for a few minutes.
If we change it.
So can you hear me now?
I can. The date would actually, yes, Tuesday, March 15th.
So that's gonna have to be changed in the letter, as well as it says we will adopt a resolution that the polls will be open from noon to 9. Guys' mics are on. I don't recall ever doing that before. When
We do it every year. I write this letter and we take care of this every year.
All right, we'll do that.
In
in
the
January.
polls.
We'll do that in January, then put it on the agenda? Or do you need it now?
I can change this letter and we can do it in January. And actually, we generally do this in January, but for whatever reason, the county is asking for it in December, but we can change that part word and I don't mind.
Okay. Why don't you do that?
So-
and remind me to have it on the agenda in January.
Okay. Are we considering changing the time?
No, but this letter, have you sent this letter already?
Mm-mm. No.
Looks like you just made a change, did you, to the letter?
I did. I took the second part out. About the polling.
So you're confusing me now. Do we need a resolution to set the time or not?
No, we don't have to do that till January. That's fine.
Then you don't need a resolution to send this letter either.
No, I don't.
Then go ahead and send the letter and we'll do the resolution in January.
Okay, that's what okay.
Anything else on your report?
No, sir.
Any questions for? Okay.
Nope.
Okay. Any items of old business?
No.
Any items of new business? Our second public comment period, privilege of the floor. I see only Mary left online. Anything else for us tonight, Mary?
No, nothing for me.
All right, thank you. Then I would entertain a motion to go into executive session to discuss personnel issues.
So moved. Second. With regret.
All in favor?
Aye.
That's a day. Wouldn't matter.
Stop recording. We are in executive session.
Leave people wondering. What is he?
And Vicky and Tammy, did you both